This boy sank into the ocean. Taiha was just a child when his family was betrayed in the middle of the sea. There was nothing he could do. He swam through the raging waves trying to reach his mother, but when he found her, she was already dead. Taiha couldn't believe what was happening until a massive wave dragged his body down into the depths, and around him, everyone he knew was sinking, one by one. Just as he was about to drown, someone grabbed him. It was his grandfather, the supreme leader of the Cheongu group. Trembling, Taiha tried to speak about his parents, but the old man stopped him and said, "No matter what happens, never forget this. You must take revenge on them all." Then he handed Taiha a pen, the symbol that would mark him as the rightful heir. After that, his grandfather took off his own life jacket, put it on Taiha, and threw him back into the sea. Days later, the boy was found by the Italian mafia, the ones who would create the greatest assassin in history, a cold man driven only by his lonely quest for revenge. The cause of it was a large cargo ship passing through the area. A person smiles while their face is obscured by the light. Taiha was very scared and confused after being rescued. Two guards equipped with rifles are surprised to see that the child is still alive. One of them begins to shout for his boss, announcing that the boy is okay. Hearing a language different from his own, the protagonist realizes they are both Italian. The man continued trying to communicate with his boss. Someone seems to hear that call. While one of them complains about his boss being in that place again, a heavyset man asks if the child can understand him. However, Taiha observes the tattoo standing out on the man's neck. Thus, the protagonist understands that, with that tattoo and those weapons, the people on that ship are not ordinary. Suddenly, the leader of the group leaps from where she was. Startling him, the woman lands in front of the boy, questioning how he reached her ship. Her subordinate warns that the child might not speak their language. Irritated, she orders them to bring someone who can help them communicate. Taiha just watches them, slightly nervous, not knowing how to react. However, surprising the woman, he speaks in Italian, explaining that he was on a yacht that was attacked nearby. At this, she questions where that impressive child came from. He explains that he is Korean, and that during the storm, his family's ship was invaded by armed people who killed his parents and grandfather. The leader says that, apparently, after being shipwrecked, he reached the Salerno family ship. Confused, the boy wonders what the Salerno family is. She begins to laugh at the situation, since an Asian child who speaks Italian claims to have come from the Gulf of Aden in the Middle East. Taking a knife, the woman says that it is shameful, but she cannot believe it. Pointing the blade at the boy, Regina asks if there is any reason why she shouldn't throw him back into the sea. The boy doesn't know what to say to avoid that. Nervous, he tries to think of something as quickly as possible. Thus, Taiha shows the pen given to him by his grandfather, explaining that he is the grandson of Sayoko, chairman of the Cheongu group, and the son of Suyok, his grandfather's third son. He argues that instead of throwing him back, they could help him get in touch with his people, thereby reaping benefits. Agitated, Regina asks if he is really talking about the Cheongu group. She notes that this is the most successful conglomerate in South Korea, and apparently that brat is part of the family. Therefore, the woman in charge orders her subordinates to check the news related to Korea. While they both look for something related to what the boy said, the woman asks if the child speaks any other languages. He informs her that he knows Cantonese, English, Japanese, Arabic, Spanish, Hindi, and Esperanto, claiming to be fluent enough to have basic conversations. One of the men says he found some news from Korea. Regina smiles, realizing that this is fascinating. She says that if the boy wants to contact someone from Korea, he can ask them. But the boy remembers what his grandfather had said, asking him to look for lawyer Kim, as the man would know how to assist him. The protagonist states that he needs her to contact someone from outside his family. In Seoul, at 1:12 a.m., someone answers the phone asking who it is. The person says they are calling from abroad, warning that they will communicate only in English, asking if he is lawyer Kim. Regina says that, from the photo she sent him, the lawyer must have already realized she has the group's precious grandson with her. Asking if she should send him back to Korea, the old man instead questions what she means by that. She makes an offer of $10 million, informing him they should meet at the Panama Canal for the exchange. However, the guy claims he is too busy to negotiate, so he makes a counteroffer, offering $1 million. Leaving his glass of drink on the table, he picks up a microphone that was nearby, swearing and saying it will be $1 million. While dancing with some people, the madman says he will pay $1 million if she kills Taiha. Ordering the woman to kill the boy and send him video proof within the next 5 minutes, he promises she will receive $1 million as a reward. Regina asks what would happen if he didn't send the money after the job. While everyone watches, the lawyer assures her that he only needs to make 3 taps on his phone to send such a small amount. Furthermore, if she doesn't do it, Kim says he will release to the press that they were the ones responsible for the attacks. Hanging up the call, he tells his master there is no need to worry, as he has contacted some mercenaries near them. Thanks to that, the Cheon-gu group is now all theirs. The boy was still paralyzed by everything he heard. After all, that man wants him dead in the next 5 minutes. Making him increasingly scared, the woman says that, apparently, that's how things work, since because of that, her reason for keeping him alive is gone. Terrified, Taiha begins to beg them not to kill him. However, Regina states that he is no longer a member of a rich family. Besides, they are likely already preparing a funeral for him, questioning if the boy knows what that means. Claiming that this is quite common in her world, people killing others to take over their assets and achievements. Terrified, he complains about why his uncles and relatives are planning to kill his entire family. Both guards talk to each other, saying their boss won't kill him, but she is having fun while teasing him. Trembling, he cannot believe he survived the sea only to die at the hands of people he doesn't even know. Wondering what Cheon-gu means, and if it was really worth killing his parents and grandfather for the positions they held. Suddenly, someone enters the room announcing they are under attack. The guy informs them that 3 patrol ships and an extremely armed military helicopter have appeared. She asks if it's Interpol. However, the man says no, and explains that they are ignoring their radio transmissions. Regina doesn't understand what is happening. After all, it would have to be someone very crazy to do something like that. Looking at the child, she finally understands the culprit, realizing that those Koreans must have contacted those people to look for that boy. Out of nowhere, Taiha stabs his right hand with the pen. No one understands what that child is trying to do. He says the Cheon-gu group will never give her the money. Furthermore, the woman has nothing to gain if she kills him. The trade leader of the Salerno family is surprised to see the boy's reasoning. The protagonist asks to join them, stating he will be loyal for the rest of his life if she helps him get revenge. The woman wonders how he learned the Salerno insignia. The crazy woman begins to laugh wildly. Excited, Regina tells Matteo to get ready, as she needs to start the show. Before leaving, she asks if the boy understands the weight of those words, questioning if he wants the power of revenge, even if he has to stain his hands with blood. Recalling that his grandfather had said that no matter the means necessary, he should inherit Cheon-gu at all costs. Decisive, the protagonist just nods his head affirmatively. With a smile, she says that barking dogs rarely bite, but even so, it was very interesting. The crazy woman kicks the door, asking them to follow her, claiming that, from that point on, the boy's life belongs to the Salerno family, so he will live and die for it. Therefore, he must watch carefully, as that is his future. Taiha watches indeed, left stunned by what he sees. With that, 17 years pass, and he finally returns to Korea. The boy asks his father and mother to protect him while he takes his revenge. However, he seems to be surprised by something. Turning around quickly to look back, he jumps to the side as several shots hit the spot. Several soldiers had arrived at the scene and fired numerous shots at Taiha. Getting out of some vehicles, someone questions if those insects don't even know how to aim. A security guard and manager of the Cheon-gu group orders them to search for the senior administrative director, stating that he doesn't know that man, but he is certainly a madman for thinking he could kidnap a Cheon-gu director. One of the subordinates tells the manager they found the car they were looking for. He orders everyone to be careful when opening the trunk, as the director is still alive. While he orders them to check his wounds, a large explosion occurs. The guy gets angry at the audacity of placing a bomb there. However, suddenly, half of his men have their heads decapitated. When he finally looks back, the rest of them are also killed. In an extremely fast manner, Taiha had defeated them all in moments. The guy notices he suffered a small cut on his waist. Nervous, he sees that this was thanks to the protective vests. Trying to attack the protagonist, the bald man calls him a little insect. However, the boy tells him not to think he is the only one with something to say. Quickly, he lands another cut on the back of his opponent, launching an attack that splits him in half. As he collapses, Jang wonders what that was, not understanding how that man managed to do such a thing, complaining about who that monster really is. On the other hand, the protagonist did not seem to be happy with it. He begins to clean his daggers as he walks away, heading to a luxury car and taking a bag that was in the back seat. Thus, he goes to the trunk. Squirming, the director begs Taiha to let him go, claiming he was only following orders. This was the former lawyer Kim, the person who had ordered his death, stating that he had no reason to kill the chairman. However, the boy opens the bag and throws several bills over the man, informing him that those are the 1 million. After all, that money must not have been delivered to him. Terrified, the guy asks what money Taiha is talking about. However, the director remembers that day. The protagonist takes a lighter from his coat, stating that thanks to the fact that he died that day. While throwing the lighter, he says he was reborn. With that, Kim begins to be burned alive. Coldly, Taiha just watches with indifference. After that, he calmly picks something up. Placing a cigar in his mouth, the protagonist mentally tries to speak to his parents and grandfather, asking for forgiveness for taking so long, praying for them not to worry and just find peace, claiming that he will take on all their suffering from that day forward. After some time, in the middle of the city, a modern building stood out among the others. The protagonist moved rapidly, determined to act. Some men questioned where he thought he was going, preparing to fire to stop him. However, the madman simply kills both of them quickly. Even so, Taiha did not seem bothered by the unexpected encounter. He continues walking through the hall calmly. Seeing the situation, a man sits on the floor, terrified by the scene. Scared, he questions the protagonist about who sent him there. The guy says they are part of the Cheon-gu group, claiming that Taiha will not be safe after doing all that. While cleaning his blade, Taiha says that this is Holdings, a private security company subcontracted by Cheon-gu. Their main function is the protection of directors and board members outside of working hours throughout the Gangbuk area. During their downtime, they stalk journalists or people who have reported on Cheon-gu. They then kidnap and assault them, even killing them. In other words, they are hired assassins. The people who had been captured were completely desolate and desperate. The protagonist simply throws one of the daggers to an old man. After that, he tells everyone to use it to free themselves and to make sure they never saw him there. Thus, the restraints are cut. The three were still confused by everything that had happened. The old man stands up and brings the knife back to the boy. Running, they give thanks as they leave. On the other hand, the company member orders everyone to come back. One of the fugitives looks back while hearing the man complaining. The heavy-set man questioned who he was, asking if Taiha was part of their family. Removing his mask, the boy says no, and explains that he just wanted to have a more private conversation. He states that he needs the schedules of everyone on the board, from the directors to the chairman. The guy says he doesn't know, and even if he did, he wouldn't say, since he and his family would be dead if he did. The protagonist says that apparently, the man prizes his life, stating that he will start with his eye and as soon as he feels ready, he should raise his hand. On a building, a large screen outside showed news related to some celebrity. In contrast, several people were sitting on a staircase in a state of homelessness. Because of the heat, even a cicada lay dead on the ground. Breaking the silence of the place, someone seems to be in a hurry. While walking, Taiha notices that a cigar would draw too much attention, wondering if he should try Korean cigarettes. The avenue was very busy at that hour. He says he has finally returned to Korea and so far, everything seems normal, but he notices that his country is going crazy, with various advertisements related to credit and insurance being announced everywhere. A politician was giving a speech, stating that he would use his power and influence to eradicate the epidemic of crime and violence. He claimed that, from that day on, his war on crime would be publicly declared. However, his speech is interrupted by someone pointing a gun in his direction. It is said that in 1990, the president was killed during his campaign against organized crime. Since then, no one has opposed criminal groups, making the country a place succumbed to violence and money. The boy walked through the streets lost in thought. Thus, the Cheon-gu group allied itself with criminal organizations to bribe the media and suppress competitors. They invested in entertainment and sports, making the population lose interest in politics to the point where even a dog could be a candidate. Even so, people continued to say that the Cheon-gu group was a company that did good for the people. Taiha enters a store calmly. The clerk welcomes him. Both he and another young man ask for a pack of this. They stare at each other for a moment, not understanding how such a coincidence could happen. Slightly annoyed, the protagonist decides to change his choice. However, both have the same idea and ask for a plus at the same time. The two stare at each other again, suspicious of one another. Awkwardly, the woman says that, unfortunately, they only have one pack left. Taiha sighs deeply, clearly irritated by the occurrence. Stepping back, he tells her to give that pack to the other man, as he will be fine without it. The guy continues to stare at him as the boy leaves. After the man makes his purchase, he finds the protagonist outside, who politely says, "Excuse me," asking if he could borrow a cigarette. However, the man asks if the boy couldn't just go to another convenience store, but Taiha explains that it has been a long time since the last time he was in Korea, so he would like to try it quickly. The guy gives up on trying to avoid him. While handing over one of the cigarettes, he says he can't believe someone wants to try that tasteless thing. Walking along, the man says he will get a fine if he smokes there, so he recommends waiting until they reach a smoking area. Observing this, Taiha admits that when you have been in a mafia for about 17 years, a simple look is enough to evaluate a person. Assuming that guy is strong, as strong as those he faced abroad. He wonders if such people are common in Korea. Also departing, the protagonist declares that he would not like to meet him again. After some time, that same man arrives at the place where the protagonist had carried out the massacre. While smoking, he calmly observes one of the bodies. Bending down, the guy looks more precisely at the corpses. He notices that all were fatally wounded by stabs from a blade with a length close to that of a sashimi knife. Putting out his cigarette in the pool of blood, he picks up his phone and calls his employer. His master warns that he had already told him not to call at that hour. The man asks if the guy has a meeting later, informing him that the best choice is to cancel the appointment. After all, the assassin who killed director Kim might be after him. The guy who was calmly drinking his wine questions what is happening. His subordinate explains that he went to the security company and found them dead. From the wounds, it seems to have been a solo attack. Besides the assassin not being an ordinary person, it is very possible he knows the exact location of the meeting. However, his master says that a family meeting during emergency events is a custom of the Cheon-gu group, questioning if his subordinate really thinks someone would invade a meeting that only family members know about. He states that he sent him so he could hunt that man discreetly. Getting lost in his thoughts, the guy notices that the wounds from that knife remind him of something. He remembers the protagonist asking for a cigarette, specifically his hands as he took the cigarette. He asserts that if he doesn't use knives, there is no way he could have gained all those scars on his palms. With this in mind, Huimin asks his master if there is anyone in his family who is good with knives. Laughing, he says those people can barely slice an apple. Furthermore, everyone is present except for the children. Therefore, he offers another 100 million for Huimin to guard that place and ensure its safety. Leaving the office, the guy says he will go to the meeting. Even so, he asks for security to be increased. Irritated, his master simply says he understands. Handing his cell phone to another employee, the man says that the madman is just a gangster and still thinks he can give him orders. While walking through the hallways, he tidies himself up and prepares for the meeting. Arriving at the meeting, he greets his boss and asks when the chairman arrived. Talking on the phone, Huimin communicates to the leader of his gang that he plans to help the Cheon-gu group for one more day before returning. However, he is called a traitor, but instead of getting angry, he asks if his boss has been drinking. He informs him that they offered him another 100 million for the service, claiming that only a fool would refuse. Additionally, there seems to be a dangerous assassin on the loose. However, he notices that the protagonist was hidden in the alley. Quickly, Huimin finishes the conversation and says he will tell the details later, looking toward the boy. Feigning innocence, he asks if one cigarette wasn't enough. Taeha says that finding someone of that caliber near the scene of the accident is no coincidence. Claiming it was good, he followed him. Smiling, the man says it has been quite a day. First, they took a cigarette from him, then they followed him. He ensures he can't believe he didn't notice him, admitting that was the first time something like that had happened. Moving toward him, the protagonist says that before they start, he would like to ask one thing, questioning if the guy is working with the Cheon-gu group. On the other hand, Huimin asks if he wasn't listening to the conversation, saying he is helping them temporarily. At that, the boy glares at him with a deathly stare. Drawing the two daggers from his back, he soon clashes his blade against the enemy's weapon. Both exchange looks, evaluating each other's skill. Thus, a frantic exchange of blows begins. However, Huimin leaps, getting above the protagonist. He swings his equipment to launch a strike. To his surprise, his bat is cut into several pieces. Seeing that, the gangster wonders when that happened. Furthermore, Taeha had disappeared in the blink of an eye. However, his opponent becomes nervous upon realizing something. The positions had reversed, and the one in the air now was the protagonist, who quickly prepares to finish the battle. With a certain fear, Huimin admits that the Cheon-gu have found themselves in big trouble this time, wondering how they became the targets of a monster like that. Taeha plunges toward his adversary while wielding his blades. The gangster doesn't know what to do now that he is without his weapon. The protagonist lands a blow, knocking the man to the ground, already preparing to leave. While wiping the excess blood from his knife, he heads toward the alley exit, leaving Huimin's body lying there. However, to his surprise, the guy asks if the boy is joking. Even wounded, he had not yet died. Asking if, even after all that, the protagonist is really just going to leave like that, he asserts that he will regret keeping him alive. Sheathing the dagger, Taeha explains that he has his own principles, warning that if he were with the Cheon-gu group, he would already be dead. He tells the man to stay out of his path. Otherwise, the next time he hears of him helping his enemies, he won't be so kind. Furthermore, if he cannot accept the fact that he was spared, he can simply view it as repayment for the cigarette. Still fallen on the ground, Huimin smiles as he realizes that a simple cigarette saved his life, admitting that this time it was very cheap. A little later, a car drives through the streets in a hurry. Obviously, the protagonist was the driver. For some reason, he seemed to be irritated and in pain. Seeing a wound at the level of his waist, Taiha says that at least the blow wasn't deep. While driving, he says that at least he can still move, hurrying even more, as he only needed 32 minutes. He says that finally, his revenge planned for 17 years will bear fruit, with only 32 minutes left until the conclusion. Again, the boy is taken by memories of when he was a child. His mother begged him not to look, while his father used his body to protect them both from the gunfire. However, extremely scared and worried, he runs toward his father. The man asks what she is doing, begging his wife to take the boy and run. Thus, his mother grabs Taiha so they can try to leave. However, the ship begins to move frantically. Even the assassins have to struggle to maintain their balance. His mother places the boy outside the door. She begs her son to find a life vest and jump into the water. With a smile, Huijong asserts that he needs to survive. One of the men says that it is annoying and mentions that he had given orders to detonate the bombs only after eliminating everyone. Looking toward him, the protagonist is surprised, as the assassins know how to speak Korean. The man's face was completely covered by a mask and goggles while he aimed toward him and his mother. Huijong grows desperate and tells Taiha to run as fast as possible. The boy begins to run desperately through the boat. Besides being startled, the child was terrified. He ran panting while he couldn't stop crying. With the previous explosion, part of the yacht was already in flames, but then another bomb is detonated. Because of this, the ship begins to sink faster and faster, returning to the present day in the secret annex of Gangbook. The CEO of the Cheongu Group department store asks if they really found the one who killed Director Kim. However, Jashong says it was likely a crime of passion. After all, the director had 2 secret lovers. His sister says that is very disgusting. However, the guy says that is ironic coming from someone who has several affairs. Jong-won asks what Director Kim's share in the company's stock was, claiming they will need to announce it soon. But suddenly, someone slams their hand on the table, drawing everyone's attention. The man orders everyone to be silent. Guho tells his son to speak. Chiang says that 2 employees were found at the scene. However, they didn't have much to say and were discarded. Furthermore, they had confirmation that there were no other witnesses present. The guy says they were just subcontractors, so they don't know much in general, and the police guaranteed the incident wouldn't leak. Suddenly, his father throws a wine glass at his head. Everyone at the table was confused by what just happened. The old man asks where the Oseong gang is. Chong was visibly irritated by that. Even so, the guy cracks a smile, saying they don't seem to know anything, having even sent Huimin, the 7th in command. However, the madman smashes a bottle over his son's head. The old man says that even in 24 hours, he didn't find out who the killer is or where he is. Instead, he reported a gang. He says that if the former chairman and Soo-yak hadn't died 17 years ago, someone as incompetent as him would never have set foot there. In addition to the wine, the guy's face was completely covered in blood. Regardless of what happened, Cheong ensures he will find him within the next 12 hours. The rest of the family sees that neither of them has changed, and this bothers everyone. Juhui asks why he is so rigorous with the eldest. After all, he is still his oldest son. However, her brother says it's not out of hate. He asserts that surely it is out of fear. Grabbing a cloth, Cheong immediately asks his subordinate to give him his phone. While cleaning his face, he looks for something on his phone. He questions where his men are. His assistant informs him they are already ready. The madman says that is exciting, saying he is looking forward to seeing how grand that entrance will be. On a road during the night, the protagonist headed toward his goal. Taiha admits he has always kept an eye on the Cheongu group. 17 years ago, on the day he was accepted by the Salerno family, even before his grandfather's funeral, Guho became the new chairman, taking over all the shares and seizing his position. Taking advantage of the disorder of the failed war on crime and allying with factions like the Oseong gang to increase his power. Even though that was the beginning of the Cheongu era, they still hold meetings with official members at times like that. This was an old family tradition from when his grandfather was alive. Neither the system nor the traditions changed. Everyone killed to reach the positions within the hierarchy created by Sioko, willing to even assassinate their parents and him. One of the security guards monitored the cameras, wondering whose car was approaching. Thus, he asks his superior if the members are expecting a guest, but this is denied. He informs him that there is a car heading toward the front gates. Furthermore, it doesn't seem to be slowing down. Seeing that it is likely some madman, the head of security orders the pillars to be raised. With that, some containment bollards begin to rise from the ground. However, the protagonist accelerates even more. After all, he doesn't need tricks up his sleeve to finish off people who have been protected all their lives. Taking off his belt, Taiha says it makes no sense to create elaborate plans. The front of his car is completely destroyed by the impact. Even so, he leaps out with his blade in hand, asserting that the only thing he hopes is that they haven't forgotten his family, so he can say it to everyone's face. The security guards look at the intruder in shock. The boy quickly finishes them all off in a single attack, and he claims that he is back. Confused, they ask what that loud noise was, questioning why it is getting louder and louder. Furthermore, it seems to be coming from the front gate. Unlike the others, Chiang seemed to be confused but confident. His uncle tells the guy to go there and check the cause of all that commotion. However, surprising Jongwon, he says there is no need for that. All the guards inside the hall point their weapons at the family members. The eldest sister questions what is happening. Guho, irritated, asks if they really want to play around at a time like this. However, his son stands up calmly while wiping his mouth. The old man questions if he will really do that. With a smile, Chiang claims his father already expected this to happen sooner or later. That was the reason his father was always angry with him, as he was afraid of ending up just like his grandfather. With a terrifying face, the madman says that, after all, the one who killed his grandfather and uncle was him. On the other hand, the protagonist was passing through the gates, saying his revenge would finally begin. The security guards point their weapons, questioning if this is some kind of ambush. Jashong asks if his nephew has gone mad. They question what the guy is doing, claiming that he should never point a weapon at his own family. However, Chiang asserts that he isn't doing anything. Despite this, they continue swearing at him, saying they've made their point clear. Looking at one of the guards, Juhui questions if he will really betray them for that brat. Even though he is her personal bodyguard, Youngmin apologizes, demonstrating that he is abandoning her. Even the second son's bodyguard says it isn't personal, but the rewards for betrayal were simply too seductive. On the other hand, one of them says that if they had at least received a raise, this wouldn't be happening. The only person who remains in silence is Chiang's own bodyguard. The guy's father says he can understand the others betraying him, but he doesn't understand why his own son did it. He asks if his guard will really turn his back on them. Junsu just watches, without moving or saying a word. The man says he isn't paid to protect the father himself, but rather the Cheongu group. Jongwon asks if the guards really think they will gain anything by doing this. He tries to continue threatening them, but a gun is placed against his head. His own bodyguard kills him in cold blood. With that, both remaining siblings become desperate and beg for mercy. However, shots echo through the hall as blood spatters. Chiang hands the cloth to his subordinate. Walking calmly toward his father, the old man admits he already expected something like this to happen one day, since the day his other son died of acute leukemia, and shortly after that, his wife filed for divorce without wanting a single cent. Trembling with rage, he says he always suspected Chiang was behind everything, and because of that, always kept his distance. While spinning the gun, the guy says that for someone who ordered the deaths of his own father and brother, Guho talks too much. Placing the gun to his head, the man questions the old man about who it was that sent his own father and brother to the middle of the sea. He asks what else he could have done, since if he hadn't killed them all, Suyak's son would have inherited the presidency and they wouldn't have reached this point. The psychopath approaches and questions why his father never declared him as the future successor. The old man becomes increasingly terrified by it all. Furthermore, his son was staring at him in a terrifying way, while Guho claims that if he had done that, the boy would have killed him much sooner. He doesn't deny that he would have killed him earlier. However, he says he is a bit upset to hear that. His father ensures that even by killing him there, the guy will never become the president. But Chiang interrupts him, saying he already knows. After all, power transfers through political coups or violence are not recognized. That is a clause made by the committee. At that, the guy says it's a shame. He informs him that the person making a noise outside is not one of theirs. The president asks who it could be. While shooting his father, he explains that it is a young master who waited 17 long years for this day. The guards were firing at the intruder. They tried to surround him, since the assassin did not possess a firearm. The protagonist remembers that the core security force consists of the people who look after the executive members, so they hold high-ranking positions. Therefore, he assumes the bodyguards will be much stronger than the ones before. He stops running for a moment, changing the direction of his advance. The boy claims this won't be a problem. He moves toward the enemies in a zigzag pattern to evade the gunfire, using the body of one of the guards as a shield. Desperately, the man begs them not to shoot since he would be hit. However, the guards don't care and fire anyway. Leaving one of the security guards terrified, his weapon is cut in half. In an instant, Taiha manages to defeat everyone quickly. The leader asks his men to evacuate the president as fast as possible. However, The protagonist throws his dagger at the guy. A guard manages to stop the knife. A guy in glasses asks why they are making all that noise, questioning if they can't do it in silence. 3 department heads appear to try and stop him, but that little group is simply ignored as the protagonist kills the others. One of them says he can stop him alone and tells his companions to wait. However, even though he is extremely strong, Taiha was suffering from the wound he received earlier. With every passing minute, the wound seemed to get more serious. Coming to his senses, he realizes his enemy's fist is already extremely close to his face. Thus, his only option is to block the attack while being thrown backward. He manages to regain some of his balance, but unexpectedly, a shadow rises above him. The man asked how he dared to attack that place, and on top of that, be distracted while invading his territory. However, the protagonist agrees and says it's not the time to be distracted by wounds, launching a cut through the center of the man's chest. This startles his companions upon seeing that sudden defeat. Quickly, Taiha throws his remaining dagger at the 2 who are left. Both were no longer as confident as they were initially. Surprisingly, the intruder had already landed a blow on the man who defended his long-range attacks. Chulho can barely keep up with him with his eyes. Picking up one of the knives he had thrown, the protagonist cuts off the head of the last department head. Thanks to that, he had defeated all the security guards outside. While walking to the entrance, he sees his second dagger. He picks it up calmly, as if there were no one else there. While wiping away the excess blood, he assumes he took longer than expected. Even so, the place is strangely silent. Wondering if they managed to escape through some secret passage he didn't know about, the boy begins to walk through the house without knowing what awaits him, finally reaching the room where everyone was dead, and only Chiang remained seated amidst the blood, welcoming him. He also congratulates him for making it this far, asking if he wants to sit down to catch his breath and rest. Seeing all that, even the protagonist doesn't understand exactly what is happening. Observing Jashong's body with a bullet hole in his forehead, as well as his aunt Juhui, even Zhongwan had met the same fate. The current president was also dead. Standing up, his cousin says he looks better than he imagined, claiming that modern assassins must take better care of themselves. Greeting him formally, Chiang asks if he recognizes him. On the other hand, the protagonist only says the man's name and the fact that he is Guho's eldest son. Laughing, the madman says he doesn't remember them being so close to the point of him calling his father by his first name. Suspicious, Taiha simply observes that abnormal behavior. His cousin says he waited there because he thought it was disrespectful not to greet him. Plus, he needs to explain a few things, informing him that if he doesn't want to sit, they can remain standing, as it won't take long anyway. Chiang questions if the boy remembers that day 17 years ago, the day he was rescued by the Italian mafia. Interrupting his speech, his bodyguard warns that the helicopter is ready, claiming they must leave soon as it is very dangerous. Getting irritated, the guy warns that he had asked her to call him only after he finished speaking. However, Taiha is suddenly surprised by something, clearly demonstrating he didn't expect it, saying he recognizes that voice, the voice of the one who killed his family 17 years ago, recalling the man who pointed the rifle at him and his mother, the person who complained about the early explosions while laughing beneath the mask. Extremely angry, Taiha asks if he was that worm. The madman begins to try and hold back his laughter, stating he doesn't have much to say, telling the protagonist to stop talking to him so casually, as it's making him want to kill him. Charging forward, he tells the guy to try, as his goal from the beginning was to wipe out the entire family. But his cousin begins to say that there is a saying that when you are in Korea, you must act like a Korean, ordering him to switch his speech. Irritated, Taiha begins to try to understand the situation for certain. He realizes that Chiang knows he survived 17 years ago, and also knows about the fact that he is a Salerno assassin. He wonders why Chiang waited until his return, 17 years after the event, to stage a coup. Trying to get the boy's attention, the guy asks him to truly listen, saying he is about to begin. Only then does Taiha understand that, in reality, that madman doesn't want a coup. He wants to blame Taiha for the attack, claiming he was the one who led it, so that Chiang can successfully take over the presidency. Junyak tells the young master that they don't need an introduction. The protagonist simply holds his dagger out in front of him. The bodyguard begins to fire at the boy. However, the assassin manages to deflect all the shots. Using his blade, he diverts the trajectory of the projectiles, rapidly closing the distance between them. However, another guard delivers a hard blow to the boy. Even knowing there would be more, he couldn't predict the hit. Unlike the other, The man introduces himself as Junho Park. Avoiding being cornered, the young master moves backward quickly, stopping in front of his adversaries. Without wasting time, Junhyuk begins to fire at him again, admitting he is faster than the rumors, saying he would dominate track and field if he were a professional. His partner blocks the protagonist's escape. Even Taiha becomes a bit nervous about the situation. Junho asks if flexibility is the secret to the young master's success, quickly delivering a frantic sequence of attacks. Taiha notices that they are strong, completely different from the ones he faced outside. However, if it weren't for that wound, he could even face them without a problem. Noticing that Chiang seems to have lowered his guard, he realizes this might be the only chance before the guard Junsu arrives. Additionally, if the woman beside him is Da-in, there are 3 guards present. However, there were 4 members at the meeting. Unexpectedly, his thoughts are interrupted by Junho preparing to attack him. Thanks to the reflection in his adversary's pupil, Taiha manages to identify the 4th security guard. Youngmin was holding a sword, preparing to attack him from behind. To the surprise of both, he disappears from between them. They cannot understand how that is possible. Kneeling on the floor, the protagonist realizes that this must be the last one. The guy complains about being reflected, blaming Junho, but his companion says that if it were easy, the boy would already be dead. Reloading their weapons, Junhyuk mentions he can barely imagine the bonus they will receive if they kill that guy. Thus, both he and the guard in glasses use their weapons to fire at the assassin. Seeing the situation, Chiang remarks aloud that it is difficult to keep up with a fight involving both ranged and hand-to-hand combat. He warns that they were trained for the purpose of defeating him, as rumors of his inhuman speed had circulated through Interpol. Admitting he even thought about killing him with a bomb, he notes that the story of him dying during a battle would bring him better fame. Junho positions himself in front of the boy, intending to prevent him from escaping. Junhyuk says it doesn't matter how fast he is. Everything will end now that Taiha has been cornered. With that, the guard uses his brass knuckles to try to land a blow. The protagonist didn't have much to do, simply watching the attack coming his way. His cousin thanks him for the show while smiling wickedly. After being hit by his enemy's fist, he is slammed against the wall, causing it to crack entirely. Flashing back to 4 years ago, Regina was scolding him and asking what that was, stating she had told him to take care of the traitor, not use him as paint for the walls. Even she began to vomit seeing that scene. Still arguing, the woman says that with his speed, he could have done it silently. Recalling the day they saved him, she says she understands his anger, since Lorenzo always treated him well, but killing someone like that will only make people want revenge. Therefore, as his mentor and spokesperson for the Salerno family, Regina asks the boy never to do something like that again. However, the protagonist did not seem happy or regretful. Even so, he says that this way, people will never know. Confused, she asks what Taiha is talking about. He explains that if they kill traitors silently, their deaths will not serve as an example. Asserting that everyone needs to know what awaits them if they betray the family, rumors need to spread in an exaggerated and distorted way. This way, the number of traitors will decrease. Otherwise, it will always be an incessant struggle. The woman asks if he chose the path of violent deaths to avoid greater bloodshed. Stepping away from where he stood, the entire surroundings were stained with blood. She says it is absurd for such a thing to come from a boy standing in the middle of a river of blood without a single drop on his face. Interrupting her own thoughts, Regina says that apparently being an assassin really doesn't suit him. Returning to the current moment, Junho freezes as a glow appears in the middle of his chest. The guy begins to spit blood while that glow continues to emanate. Even Chong and his female bodyguard are surprised by it. The protagonist had cut the man brutally. With a threatening look, he glares at his other adversaries. Scared, Youngmin points his weapon quickly, but in an instant, his eye is pierced. After receiving the attack, the guy mentally admits they underestimated that man, since in addition to his speed, he possesses strength. Furthermore, those who truly saw his abilities never lived to tell what they are like. Despite showing all that capacity to continue fighting, Taiha was even more injured, and his wounds were worsening. Junhyuk was desperate, as no one had said his strength was so great. However, Junsu appears and calls for the woman, asking her to take the master outside and claiming he will follow them shortly. Seeing this, the boy is surprised, noticing that his cousin is trying to leave. He lets out a shout, calling for the man. Cutting through both of Junhyuk's weapons, he runs toward the elevator. Chong sticks his head out to see what is happening. With uncontrollable rage, Taiha questions where he thinks he's going when their stalemate isn't over. However, blocking the entrance was Junsu, who greets the young master. He is surprised to see that the president's bodyguard has arrived. Nonetheless, the boy leaps, telling him to get out of his way. But surprisingly, the man stops both knives with a single hand. Preparing to punch him, the old man observes that the boy has grown a lot, admitting he is impressed. With that, the man lands several blows all over the protagonist's body, causing practically all his ribs to fracture. Consequently, Taiha begins to spit blood after all that damage. Breaking the blades with his hand, Junsu declares that, unfortunately, this will be his end, landing a knee strike in the same spot and throwing the assassin's body far away. However, the old man is surprised to see that his clothes had suffered a cut. Looking at his subordinate, the man tells Junyak to get up, claiming he knows he is fine. Nervous, he admits he thought he was finished. The old man warns that the building will explode soon, ordering him to take his companion and leave. Lying on the ground was the protagonist, who appeared to be dead. Reaching the rooftop, the president's bodyguard heads toward the helicopter. Chiang questions if he concluded the job. The man ensures he did and informs him that he will detonate the building as soon as they take off. Junsu says he will make the preparations to take off, but the guy tells him just to keep the door open and get them in the air. Putting on the headset, his guard warns that they will fly distracted inside the helicopter, so he suggests closing it. However, the psychopath asserts that he needs to see it, claiming he has waited a long time for that moment. With that, the helicopter begins to take off while Chiang stands in front of the door. He watches calmly while smiling, swearing and saying he always hated that house. While the guy complains about how annoying and hypocritical his family was, Da-in and Junsu stare at each other. Suddenly, the madman remembers the moment the protagonist said he hadn't finished things with him. With a smile, he calls him a poor child. After all, he lived to get his revenge and ended up meeting the same fate. He asks if they both knew that the term family comes from the Latin famulus, which means slave. Taking the detonator in hand, he asks everyone to witness the way he will change Cheongu from then on, completely destroying the mansion of those secret meetings. Inside, Taiha was lying on the ground, unconscious. Still dazed, he sees that it is the sound of the helicopter and realizes it's all over. Changing his mind, he declares that he still has time. On the other hand, Cheong watches the detonation of the place. Throwing the detonator down, the guy says they really finished in a flashy way. While the protagonist leaps through the flames, the madman says he will lie down for a bit since it's so hot, telling his subordinates to go straight to the headquarters. However, Taiha hits him with his knife. Nevertheless, he only manages to hit his calf. His cousin begins to scream in pain. Both guards stand up, worried about it. Irritated, his cousin calls him an insect and asks what he is doing. The protagonist questions if he really thought he could escape after destroying so many families. Because he is hanging from the knife, his weight causes it to tear further into Cheong's leg. While blood gushes, Taiha says he will kill him, no matter how. Diane grabs her weapon and asks her master to step back. However, the madman takes the pistol and says he will do it himself. Pointing the gun at his cousin, Cheong questions if he really thinks he is the hero of that story. Asserting that he is the main character, he calls him an outcast and tells the boy to die. While falling, Taiha manages to avoid the fatal shots, even if he was hit in other spots. With that, he is in a free fall. Immediately after they close the helicopter door, his bodyguard calls the hospital, warning them they have an emergency. The protagonist was falling from an absurd height. Luckily, he collides with a tree, causing his speed to decrease. Even so, he ends up hitting his back against the wall of a house, then falling onto a truck and rolling near a stream. Someone passing nearby on a bicycle ends up seeing that scene. The person stops and looks toward him. It was one of the victims he had saved from the security company earlier. The young man notices that this was the man who rescued him. Given the state of his body, the guy wonders if he arrived too late. However, he hears a plea for help. Looking again toward Taiha, he tries to observe more carefully. The protagonist was asking for help while barely managing to stay awake. Even extremely injured, he continued saying that it isn't over yet and asking for help. In a messaging app, someone had sent an 11-minute audio file. The person was requesting backup, informing that the guy had refused the breathalyzer test 3 times and insisted he was Congressman Kim. A man was writing something down while listening to the audio of the former director Kim, using his influence to threaten police officers. He asks someone if the voice and name are clear enough. The person questions where the director is at that moment. The young man informs him that he is likely at the station giving a statement and will head home shortly. His companion seems a bit hesitant. Consequently, the guy offers 200 and asks if that is enough to take down a major figure from the majority party. For a certain period, the only notification was that the person was typing. But to his surprise, the counteroffer is only 30. Obviously, he becomes extremely frustrated by this, asserting that it is worth much more. However, the buyer claims it isn't even election season, so no one cares about those old men. The guy says that apparently the buyer doesn't understand the current market, informing him that for a normal person they pay 1x, but for a celebrity it's 10 times. However, if it is someone related to Cheon-gu, The value is equivalent to 1,000 times. Taking a deep breath, he realizes that everything revolves around Cheon-gu. After some time, it was reported on the radio that an accident had occurred at a tower. Uninterested in that information, the guy turns off the device. He was preparing to leave. However, instead of being on the street, he was in a restaurant. The owner was already making preparations to start the day. The woman warns the young man that he will be late if he stays there. The boy says he's fine and claims he will arrive on time if he goes by skateboard. Thus, she tells the guy to eat something. However, if he did that, he really would be late. Suddenly, someone appears saying that the boss should stop playing around. A man enters, saying the owner should sell the place before they stop being polite. Boksu asks the young man if he doesn't agree with him. The lady questions if they are already there first thing in the morning to collect money, claiming that delinquents certainly know how to keep themselves busy. The woman asks the boy not to worry and to go to school, stating that nothing will change anyway. Even though he is irritated, there is nothing he can do. Picking up a knife, the madman says she shouldn't say those things rashly, claiming they are already 2 months behind. The guy tells the woman to sell the building and collect as much as possible, stating that both their interests align. She says she would never sell that place for crumbs, telling him to study basic arithmetic before coming back. On the other hand, the kid was at a station waiting for his transport. Exhausted by it all, he just sighs, not knowing what to do. He admits that in the district where he lives, the fights over redevelopment are rampant. With disputes between groups like Cheon-gu and Oseong, it is a very neglected area. It has turned into a lawless land where small gangs try to take advantage of the people living there. People like him and that lady have nowhere else to move. Upon his return, the restaurant owner had several bruises on her face. Even so, she only asks him to clean the tables. Worried, he asks her what happened to her face. A customer says he saw some men from Yaburi leaving earlier. Extremely irritated, the man says they are likely trying to pressure people into selling their buildings so they can redevelop them. She asks him not to worry and tells the brat to put his backpack in the back of the shop. The boy does as the lady asked. However, he throws everything aside in anger. Irritated, the boy laments as he realizes he really needs to do something. He recalls that before his father passed away, Dr. Young-suk was a great friend of his. She was once a professor at a medical school, but ended up crossing paths with the Oseong gang. Regardless, she looked after him. Everything that happened wasn't her fault, nor was the restaurant, even though her food is good and the dishes are always well made. Interrupting his thoughts, an idea springs to mind, remembering what that guy told him over the phone. After all, someone from the Cheon-gu group is worth 1,000 times the normal value. Thus, the boy sends him a message again. The guy asks if he has any news. Though nervous, the kid tells him everything he has, sending some images that proved his story. He claimed that a bodyguard for one of Cheon-gu's security directors, Juhak, was hooking up with Miho, the leader of the ladies' gang. Still very afraid, he awaited the buyer's response. Not quite understanding, the guy asks what the boy wants with that, but soon remembers the values mentioned previously. The next day was a sunny Saturday. Some men in suits approach and ask if he is gray. He confirms it, but as he looks back, he already realizes he shouldn't have done that. The guy lands a punch in his stomach, knocking him out and taking him to a van. While being taken away, Gray finally understands why they pay so much. After all, it was nothing but bait. The boy was tied up and sitting in the security company's room. The leader says that initially he imagined he was just an annoying informant, but in reality the kid is very good. He questions where he got those images, asking if his father hid them before he died. The guy asks if the brat is Jingu's son, one of the people who reported Cheon-gu. Seeing this, Gray gives a slight smile. Taking off his watch, the guy asks if he thinks that's funny. With that, he punches the boy's face, questioning if that is also funny. Still beating him, the man asks if he has more files like that, hurting the boy more and more, throwing him to the ground while swearing at him non-stop. Even so, Gray cannot contain his laughter and continues chuckling. Still laughing, he says the old man looks like a piece of trash he would use as a toilet, stating that if he had more, he would have already sold it. The fat man tells his subordinates to bring the hammer. The guy threatens to pull out all the boy's teeth until he understands this isn't a game. But luckily for him, one of the security guards calls the old man. His subordinate warns that a call from HQ has arrived, stating they must provide security for the emergency meeting. Standing up, he says that if it really is priority number 1, it means they should go now. Thus, he orders them to gag the boy and lock him in the room. Kicking him inside, the fat man states he will return to finish this later. Inside were already an elderly man along with a woman. Still on the floor, he says his father was a fool. Driven by a ridiculous sense of justice, he didn't even try to expose Cheon-gu. He just died in a car accident with his mother. Instead, He should have just hidden to have a peaceful life while working for them. No matter how significant the information his father possessed, as long as he remained defenseless, it was all in vain. However, they begin to hear the security guards asking who that person was. With that, gunshots and screams begin to mingle. Even the leader was desperate as he ordered his subordinates to kill that man. Everyone begins to get scared, not knowing what was happening. Suddenly, the large door opens in front of them. The protagonist gives them the knife and tells them to use it to free themselves and leave. After that, he ensures that none of the three saw him there. Neither of them quite understands what just happened. They begin to leave while thanking him for the help. That was when the boy looked around and back one last time. Observing those bodies, Gray wonders if that guy did it all alone. After some time, he finally returns home. Young-suk asks what happened to his face and where he was all that time. She gets angrier and angrier, asking the boy to speak up, but Gray says nothing happened. With a smile, a girl asks her not to worry. The boy heads to his room. The lady watches him, clearly worried. As soon as he enters his room, he collapses to the floor. Still startled, the boy wonders if it was the Oseong gang who sent that guy there. After all, they had firearms, but he killed them with just 2 knives as if he didn't care. While opening his drawer to look for something, the boy continues to wonder if the guy was sent by someone. Closing it, the kid supposes there might be something more behind it, noticing that it might be revenge. Recalling the moment the department head spoke of his father, questioning if he had more files related to Cheon-gu, the boy admits that no matter how significant the information is, it's worth nothing unless you have the power to use it. While accessing the files, Gray says he needs power. The guy says it is practically impossible to find him among those folders knowing only his face. However, he ends up remembering what one of the subordinates had said when he warned that an emergency meeting was going to happen. With that, he remembers the level 1 priority code, entering Cheon-gu's partnership directive. Seeing that this was also noted among his father's folders, he says he finally found it. It stated that in the event of a significant incident, the executive members would begin a meeting in the Bugak Mountain Annex. However, even with all that information, the actual location was not provided. Giving up, Gray says he doesn't care. After all, he doesn't even know that guy. Even so, he says that not everyone who considers Cheon-gu is considered by them in return. On the police radio, the massacre Taiha was carrying out is reported, with several confirmed victims already. The extent of the damage was unknown, but it was confirmed the mansion was used secretly by Cheon-gu executives. Standing up, the boy realizes it can only be that man. Thus, he decides to go there, taking his bicycle and heading out in the middle of the night. Even if he doesn't know who that person was or his reasons for doing all that, the best decision he can take at the moment is to go there. It was at that moment he saw someone hanging from a helicopter. After following the sound of shots and screams, the boy headed toward the place where the person might have fallen. However, upon seeing him in that state, he thought the man was dead. Seeing that blade in his hands and the person's plea for help, he notices his face while he declared that it hadn't ended. Gray is surprised by all that grit. After some time, he arrives at his house shouting for his adoptive mother. As always, she was working. Startled, the woman asks who that is and what happened to him. Desperate, the boy begs Young-suk to save that person. More time passes. The protagonist was already better and questions who he is and why he saved him. Gray introduces himself and says he buys and sells information, stating that lately he has been looking for something specific, claiming that he hoped to find someone like him. Doubting his words, the protagonist asks if someone like him could truly be a data broker. The boy continues, saying he is more of an information wholesaler, always providing top-tier intelligence to his clients. Furthermore, his main clients are other information merchants and the financial sector of Uedo. He explains that he came close to death after falling into Cheon-gu's trap, thinking he was about to meet a fellow informant. Taiha asks if the boy is one of the hostages from that day, questioning if he managed to recognize him despite having only seen him once. Gray confirms it confidently, stating that he wants to win an award for the youngest data broker or something of the sort. At this, the protagonist begins to look around, noticing the equipment the boy possessed. After that, he asks how many days he has been there, and the boy tells him that 4 days have already passed. The man wonders to himself if he really slept for that long. However, he calls for Gray and asks if such a broker would be capable of finding someone for him. But unfortunately, the boy has to admit he was bluffing, claiming that it was difficult even to find Taiha and saying he would need another broker for that. Furthermore, finding someone requires a lot of money, and above all, he would like to ask for something in return for having saved him, as he spent a great deal on medical expenses. Ignoring everything else, the protagonist asks if what the boy is trying to say is that he cannot find the person. Gray questions what the guy would do if he weren't capable. However, Taiha simply turns his back and says it's fine. Picking up his suit jacket, he thanks him for the help and says he will pay him back as soon as he resolves everything. The boy asks if he is really leaving like that, but the protagonist says he still has matters to settle. As a final piece of advice, he warns the boy not to interfere or try to stop him, as it won't end with just a single kidnapping. Scared, Gray just sits back down in his chair, but he soon cracks a smile, noting that apparently that's just how things work. After leaving the boy's room, Taiha notices a very strong smell of pork and wonders if the place is a restaurant. Surprising Taiha, Youngsuk says that the boy shouldn't be on his feet. She tells him that he was hit by 22 caliber bullets, which made it possible to stitch him up, but if his fractures do not remain immobile, he will be finished, even if a doctor helps him again. Thanking her politely, the protagonist says she must be the doctor who saved him, assuring her he will pay her back. However, she says she isn't a doctor, claiming to be the owner of a gukbap restaurant, and asks him not to come back if his stitches open up. Thus, the protagonist goes outside. Looking around, he wonders if he is in a market. Ignoring these things, Taiha picks up a cell phone. Answering it, he notes that it isn't his phone. Gray informs him that his own broke, and until it's fixed, he can keep that one. Saying there should also be a box in his pocket with earphones, he asks the protagonist to use them. Picking up the device, Taiha is surprised by its size. The kid explains the battery, connection, and microphone, also alerting him that the first button on his shirt is a camera. The protagonist says he was very clear, claiming the boy will die if he gets involved with him. However, to his surprise, the boy asks why he is exterminating the Cheongu family. The boy asks him not to be surprised. After all, even with Korea being a mess, something like that wouldn't go unnoticed. The entire country fell into chaos while he was unconscious, with news that the entire Cheongu family had been victims of terrorism. Taiha questions why he would want a favor, even knowing that. The boy explains that in that neighborhood, there are many power struggles between Oseong and Cheongu to secure redevelopment rights. Besides the two gangs closing in on the area, there are many other problems making life difficult. Even so, since the protagonist's problem seems more urgent, he will help, but in exchange, he wants assistance in the future. Until everything is resolved, they cannot lose contact. However, should Taiha refuse, he says he would have to turn him over to the Cheongu. Obviously, the man does not like this at all. Nevertheless, he says he wants to see what the brat is made of. After some time, he was already walking in a busier area, heading to a luxurious building. Taiha had gone to a kind of bank, where he had a unique safe. With that, he opens one of the drawers in search of something. Gray admits that he didn't know a company like that existed in Seoul, questioning if they could be tracked by it. But the protagonist explains that these companies work based on trust, so they would never consider dealing with other businesses. He says that people usually go there to hide jewelry or sins, making it the safest place possible. Seeing this, the boy realizes that, apparently, the guy is prepared to disguise himself. He becomes pensive, observing Taiha's actions. He is confused, since the assassin had no firearms, and a knife wouldn't be enough. Many drops of sweat begin to fall to the floor. His body was getting heavier, making it difficult to maintain a neutral face, also feeling as if he were being stabbed. He felt just like when Regina used to hit him. The protagonist questions if the boy found the guy he had asked him to look for. He asks if the CEO of the company, Night Move, Pil-jung, is the broker who helped him enter Korea. Apparently, he worked in Europe, became famous in the field, and is supposedly looking for a clandestine ship to go to China. Gray explains that border pressure increased after the guy did that to the Cheongu family. The protagonist tells the boy to announce to the traders that there is a ship available with rates 10 times above normal. His companion asks what he is going to do when he finds that guy, questioning if Taiha wants to leave with him. Putting his knives into their sheaths, he informs him that he is going to kill him. The reason he almost died that day was because someone leaked his information. The only one who knew where he was Pil-jung. Coldly, the protagonist claims that traitors must die. Later in a church, he admits he doesn't care if it's a longtime friend or not. A hooded person enters the chapel. Approaching the confessional, the man calls for the priest and asks if they can talk. He speaks a specific phrase: everyone brings water to their own mill. Pil-jung complains about the place being very stuffy, wondering why they are meeting in a sacred place. He claims that he might not look like it, but he is a devout Catholic nonetheless. However, the so-called priest only asks where the money is. The informant looks for the money in his bag. Showing the 100 million won, the guy says it was more profitable to exchange it for $10,000. Changing the subject, Pil-jung says he needs to know something. After all, that country is full of frauds like him, so he can't trust the priest. Gray warns that there are many men outside. Suddenly, several people enter with melee weapons in hand. The madman states it is very strange for someone to secure a ship that even he, an information professional, couldn't find, claiming that the rule of that line of work is clear. If someone lies, that person must pay with their own life. He admits the protagonist must be prepared to face the consequences of his actions. But, startling the guy, Taeha says he can hardly believe he wouldn't recognize the voice of his own friend. Piljong doesn't believe what he is hearing, saying they had assured him they had killed him. The man soon realizes there is no point in saying anything. Even so, he claims he was a fool, as he should have suspected as soon as he realized the password was an Italian expression. Trying to explain himself, his friend says he lost everything due to gambling, ended up in Korea, and racked up huge debts in the Cheongu casinos. While reaching for his weapon, Piljung tries to convince him that he wouldn't have said anything if he knew they would try to kill him. But before he could finish his sentence, Taeha thrusts through the wall of the confessional and pierces his throat. He falls into despair while trying to stop the bleeding in his neck. The men outside ask what is happening. Through the camera on the protagonist's shirt button, Gray could see the guy's body and all the blood that had spread. Obviously, Gray is terrified. Besides having all those injuries where many would barely be able to walk, Taeha was still going to fight. Leaving the booth, the protagonist says that Piljung certainly ordered them not to bring guns to avoid conflicts. The psychopath tells everyone to pray before they begin, asking them to tell God that they will soon be joining him, stating that it doesn't matter if they are contractors or subordinates of his friend. Gray didn't know what to do, seeing all of that. The protagonist says that the mere fact that they are armed with clubs and knives is enough for him to consider them a threat to his life. In that case, there is no reason for him to go easy. They ask what that guy can do with a broken arm. One of them runs to strike, saying that apparently there is money in the confessional. The protagonist simply prepares to defeat them. The boy admits that the assassin's broken arm isn't the only problem, since he has fractured ribs and gunshot wounds. However, he moves smoothly while dodging the attack, and, with a single movement, he pierces the back of his opponent's neck. Already moving to attack the next one, he dodges the blow again, while simultaneously cutting the man's throat. Quickly, he throws the dagger into the neck of another. One of them runs to try to stab him. However, the John Wick uses his sling to immobilize the enemy. Quickly, he lands an elbow strike with his other arm. With that, Taeha had defeated all who went against him in an instant. He explains that when someone gains the advantage at the beginning, it is hard for opponents to avoid losing their way. Considering all that money dangling before their eyes, it was obvious that adrenaline would take control. Even so, there was someone else among them. One person possessed something they shouldn't, but some of those guys charge at him. The protagonist takes a simple step forward and in doing so, disappears before everyone's eyes. Using his speed, he passes through the men. Obviously, his goal was to kill whoever could hurt him the most. The two who had stepped forward to attack him become extremely confused. Even Gray cannot understand what happened. With that, the gun falls to the ground after his charge. He calmly begins to turn toward the remaining men, asking who is next. Despite all that chaos, on the outside, the church did not seem to be affected. In the parking lot, a single car was parked at that hour. Gray was inside, unable to believe what he had just seen. He assumed that the man almost didn't seem human, since even with a wounded body, he still did all of that. Suddenly, Taeha calls for the boy and asks if he is listening. The protagonist asks the boy to go to the confessional and get a bag of money, as he doesn't have the strength for it. The brat asks, terrified, what he is talking about, but the guy says he knows he is in the area. After all, he warned him about the men before they appeared. Gray doesn't know what to say in that situation. Even though he's a bit nervous, he simply accepts the mission. Thus, the kid leaves the vehicle and heads toward the church. With that, the boy goes to the door. A bit hesitant, he opens the doors. In front of him, the church was completely stained with blood and bodies. Sitting on one of the pews was the protagonist. He announces that he is up there. Getting even more nervous, Gray begins to walk. Reaching the booth, he notices the body of the protagonist's now ex-friend. He feels a bit nauseous. After all, there were many bodies scattered all over the place. The boy says he called a taxi, warning that it should arrive in the next 10 minutes. However, looking at his companion, the boy notices that Taeha is in extremely bad shape. He asks what is wrong with the guy, saying he will call Young-suk and ask her to prepare some medicine for them. However, the madman stabs his cell phone with a knife. At that moment, Gray freezes with fear. Removing a glove, the protagonist says that when he woke up, his clothes and phone had been changed. But the funniest thing is that his gloves were still on. Obviously, the boy just listens without saying anything. On Taeha's hand, The Salerno family mark was drawn. Looking at the boy, the guy claims that he knows who he is dealing with. Gray just nods affirmatively, recalling his name, his father's name, and the fact that he is the grandson of the late chairman of the Cheongu group. He is the only Asian member of the Italian Salerno mafia, aged between 20 and 30, with a 5.5 billion bounty on his head. The boy states that he wasn't planning anything against anyone, ensuring that not even the lady knows, claiming he just needs his help. Taiha asks if that value is worth more than the risk of losing his life or receiving the reward for his head. Gray tries to say that the reason he and his adoptive mother live in hiding is because of Cheongu, but the protagonist interrupts him. He ensures that the best choice for the boy would be to hand him over to Cheongu instead of doing all this. Recalling the conversation they had earlier, when the kid said he wanted to win an award by becoming the youngest broker. Noting that the reason his career is stagnant, even though he could do more and even join the action, something no one in the business would do, is his lack of experience. That is why the big informants are usually older. With that, he questions if Gray wants to enter a much larger arena. A little later, in a large modern building, two people were walking through the hallways, while one told the other not to say anything other than what he was directly asked. Huimin gets angry and ensures he would never say anything that would put Oseong at a disadvantage. His companion says that the gang members are not known for knowing how to express themselves correctly. Even though he is irritated, the guy has no way to refute it. The two enter while the man apologizes for keeping that person waiting. Returning to the chapel, Taiha praises the boy's work, saying he will fulfill the favor, but would also like them to work together after that. He tells Gray that he will be putting his life at risk and will not have an easy death if he is caught. However, he can become the best if they work together. The protagonist says that this is a promise. After all, he will crush Cheongu once and for all. The leader of the Oseong gang admits he didn't expect them to call so soon, since they understand that Cheong must be busy with the funerals of his family members. He states they weren't going anywhere before making contact, but the guy raises his hand, asking them to be quiet. Both become afraid of what will happen next. The eccentric man makes a small gesture with his hand, signaling for them to stay silent. With that, he begins to nod his head rhythmically. A sort of speaker begins to play music. He raises his hand with a clenched fist, striking a pose of resistance. The two members of the Oseong gang do not understand what it means. Nevertheless, someone begins to clap. The man accompanying Huimin says it's a shame they arrived just as the piece was ending. Cheong questions if he knows the piece. The man states its exact name but notes that the composition seemed disjointed, assuming it might have been his performance. This clearly does not make the madman happy. He orders his bodyguard to turn it off. While Dayan uncovers her ears, the guy says that was a 6th grade piano competition, admitting he never practiced again. Furthermore, all the relatives who went to see his performance that day are currently dead. The man questions if they know what happened, ensuring that if they had known who was coming, they wouldn't have been so defenseless. However, Huimin asserts that he warned him, advising that they should have even canceled the meeting since the assassin was no ordinary person. While saying it was Cheong who ignored his warnings, Cheong reaches out, ordering him to put that cigarette away. He claims the guy was the one who knew the most. This visibly makes him angry. Cheong says that it was a traditional family emergency meeting, something that cannot be canceled on a mere whim, claiming that was why he paid him 200 million won to handle that man discreetly, without alerting the other members. The guy leans his knee against a sort of cane. While touching his leg, he says that instead of taking care of the assassin, they suffered losses and now he even has to use that thing. With that, the man says he can't help but wonder how Huimin is still alive when all the other guards died. The guy claims he already explained, saying that the assassin is killing according to his own rules, and he didn't apply to them. With a smile, the madman says that perhaps a terrorist's rule is to avoid friendly fire. Obviously, this infuriates Huimin. He tells the guy not to bark those things, questioning if they really think he would put the honor of his organization and parents at risk. Cheong says it must be nice to have parents to support you, stating that even if he wanted to, his are already 6 feet under. Suddenly, the other Oseong member adjusts his glasses, preparing to intervene. The man asks who was responsible for taking care of the terrorist. The guy ensures this shouldn't even be questioned, stating it was Mr. Junsu. The girl again looks suspiciously at the old man. Huimin's partner asks the bodyguard directly. The old man obviously confirms it immediately. However, even the guy seems to remain suspicious. He says he understands and asks what Cheong wants from them. The madman states he doesn't care about money or anything of the sort. He just wants to ensure they stay quiet about the incident. And if anyone asks, Huimin has never seen the assassin before. The guy doesn't understand why Cheongu is trying to bury the matter. His companion lights a cigarette, asking if that's all they want. Cheong tries to tell him to put out the cigarette again, but Junsu touches his shoulder. Startled, the guy looks at his security guard, who speaks in his place and assures them both that this will be enough. The Oseong representative states he needs time to digest everything, questioning if the bodyguard would also like a cigarette. However, the old man thanks him and says he lost his addiction. Nevertheless, Chiang breaks the table, becoming increasingly enraged. He questions if both of them aren't afraid. After all, he will be the new president soon, asking what that old worm is doing. The guy lets out a sequence of insults and tells that little piece of saikaos to put himself in his place. Standing up, he says, that is what his boss would say, which is why he is there in his place. Saying goodbye, the man addresses the bodyguard directly, claiming they agree to the terms. Throwing the cigarette butt on the floor, the guy tells them to have an ashtray next time, and a wet napkin to go with it, preferably. With that, the three remain in the room in a deafening silence. Cheong remains quiet for a few seconds, saying or doing nothing. Huimin says he is truly incredible, as he ended all of Cheon-gu's arrogance just using his words. Adjusting his glasses again, he says that is his function there, since apparently, Cheong doesn't understand how things work, stating that the old president really taught him nothing and that he deserved his fate for not taking care of that brat sooner. The guy is incredulous, asking if he is really trying to say that. Calmly, the older man claims the incident was likely a coup planned by Cheong to secure the position of president. The elevator opens and they resume walking, declaring that it is imperative they find the assassin who attacked the Cheon-gu group. Huimin tries to say the guy is dead, but his companion ensures that isn't true. After all, Junsu is strong, but he never kills people. The moment he asked the old man that, he was able to directly confirm his suspicions. The guy is even more impressed by the whole twist. He declares it's unlikely the man was hired by Cheong, since Junsu lost many men. The assassin was only used in the end. Huimin mentions that when he met him, the terrorist had said he hadn't been to Korea in a long time, asking if they should try to bring him to their side, perhaps even managing to subdue Cheon-gu completely. However, the man says that would be good, but even so, if he finds him, he must just kill him. The guy cannot understand the reason for everything before. However, the old man admits that what irritates him is the fact that Cheong called him, thinking Huimin is no match for the assassin. Therefore, the next time they meet, he must show them who the boss is. Japel admits he isn't Oseong's biggest fan, but he still hates to see one of his men get beaten. Returning to the inside, as some ice cubes fall into a container, Cheong ensures there is one thing he has become very good at. Thanking his father, he asks if either of them wants to guess. The room still had the broken coffee table, and both bodyguards remained static. Pouring the whiskey over the glass, the guy says he is great at picking up subtle messages. He says that when that old man asked if Taiha was really dead, the room felt as if everyone was holding their breath. Sitting on the sofa again, Cheong says his bodyguard had assured him he had finished off his cousin. However, Taiha jumped and injured his leg. Furthermore, his body has also not been found so far. Bringing the glass to his mouth, he stops for a moment. With a terrifying look, the guy questions if Taiha is still alive. Junsu asks if the guy is suggesting that he allowed the former young master to escape. The old man states that it was he who shot the boy from the helicopter. Cheong asserts that if Junsu had done his job correctly, that wouldn't have been necessary. The bodyguard admits the boy was stronger than he expected. Enraged, Cheong slams his glass onto the counter. He says that now they must move forward. Leaving the room, the guy states that his priority is the board meeting, claiming he needs to win their votes to enter the committee. The psychopath tells him that regardless of whether Taiha is alive or not, the old man cannot betray him, asking President Junsu if he's correct. The old man assures him that he never goes back on his promises. They head to the penthouse toward the helicopter, where Youngmin was already waiting for them. Cheong is surprised to see that the guard managed to survive. The man says this is different from what he was promised, asking him to reconsider his transfer. He claims he has served the Cheon-gu family for a long time, therefore he could not be transferred to be a bodyguard for a mere director. Irritated, he says that if he knew this would happen, he would never have betrayed his former boss. The madman approaches and questions who told the security guard to take a beating. Before doing anything, Youngmin looks at Dayan. While she simply lowers her head, his boss tells him to be grateful he wasn't discarded after his terrible contributions. Even so, he screams out for Junsu. The old man tells him to stay calm for now, stating he will be in touch in the future. With that, the helicopter begins to take off. Youngmin just watches them go. In a somewhat less structured part of the city, sat Mrs. Youngsuk's restaurant. Taiha says he now understands why Gray was able to identify him, since his late father was a researcher for the company. The boy says that with the tattoo on the back of his hand and the search for the 20-year-old Asian man responsible for the Cheon-gu massacre, it all made sense. Assuring him it's not so bad, the protagonist praises him, saying it wasn't bad at all. His adoptive mother states that, apparently, He seems to have too much free time. Young-suk says that for someone from the Cheongu to return for revenge, he must have plans, declaring that the boy shouldn't be standing around talking. Causing Gray to spit out what he was eating, he asks if the lady would betray him just to see him busy. At the same time, the psychopath tells himself that traitors must die. His colleague tries to smooth things over, but the woman says that is only fair. She asserts that there is no way an assassin who lived his life for the mafia could trust other people easily. However, the protagonist says he was only resolving some matters that would be more important in case of emergencies. He asks the lady not to worry, stating that anyone hated by Cheongu or Oseong is not his enemy. Thus, Taeha goes back to eating peacefully. Both realize the assassin is likely stating he can take care of them in the future if he is betrayed. Suddenly, those thugs enter the restaurant, complaining about the weather. He tells the woman to turn the air conditioning to the maximum, asking how she expects to pay her interest if the customers don't stay. Young-suk declares she has paid everything, questioning why they are making a scene again. She asks Taeha to come back after finishing his lunch and smoking, while also telling Gray to go to school. Boksu tells her to leave them alone, assuring her he won't do anything against the two. However, he seems confused and irritated by something. He says he had never seen that boy around there, questioning how someone could end up eating in a restaurant like that. On the other hand, the protagonist was surprised by the size of the radish kimchi. Becoming furious, the guy asks if the brat is choking on his food or something. Standing up, Gray tells the lady he is going to school. He heads toward the exit while looking back. Recalling that he asked his colleague to promise him something before listening to his favors, he tells Taeha not to kill or do anything of the sort, begging him not to set the neighbors against each other. The protagonist asks if the boy thinks he goes after people recklessly, but Gray declares that is exactly what he did. Returning to the subject, the guy asks what his request would be. His colleague reminds him that the 3rd district of Jangseo is in a stalemate between Cheongu and Oseong. When these disputes were actually about to turn into a mess, thanks to a local gang, Yaburi, the battle was halted. However, Taeha asks if a small gang was really capable of stopping a power struggle between Cheongu and Oseong. Gray reassures him that everyone's safety was guaranteed by Yaburi. However, they are also buying up buildings to create a housing cooperative so they can negotiate in future cases. The protagonist notices that apparently Gray does not agree with that. He states that if a deal were the solution, they would have made one already, noting that the mayor was elected with Oseong's support. Furthermore, Young-suk tried to talk to the boss, but apparently she isn't worth his time, so he asks Taeha to speak in her place. However, he could not kill or irreversibly injure anyone. The protagonist admits that, in his view, they are nothing more than common thugs, yet they were able to make the crime lords back down. He simply stands up while thanking the lady. Boksu, irritated, asks if he is really going to ignore him. He tries to go toward the brat, but Young-suk steps in his way. The woman states she already asked him not to touch her customers, saying she is already paid and questioning why the ugly one is there. The guy raises his hand to slap her, asking who she is referring to when she talks about a rotten face. However, Taeha stops the slap using a bowl. Thus, even before Gray could walk away from the shop, the 3 thugs go flying through the door. The protagonist walks out right behind them. The boy couldn't believe the madman did all that in less than 10 seconds. Terrified on the ground, Boksu asks if the brat even knows who he is. While heading toward the men, the guy mentally admits that his revenge consists of 30 grand schemes. Despite all the planning, some points were still uncertain. After all, he hadn't considered that his true enemy would be Cheong. Therefore, he considers that a failure, but he can guess Cheong's plan for the future, since despite being of the Jin family bloodline, he will still need to be elected as president by the board of directors. Thus, he will use the development of the Janseo district to disrupt the board, asking the delinquents to take him to their boss. While they ask if the boy is crazy, a girl on the other side of the street questions who he is. Suri asks if he wants to start a war against her gang alone. However, Taeha just answers negatively, calmly taking a cigarette and lighting it, informing her he is only there to talk. Suri questions what he means by that, asserting that it is impossible to believe him when his men are fallen on the ground while he says such things. However, the protagonist just looks toward them, understanding the situation. The boy apologizes, saying they don't seem interested in listening to him, therefore he doesn't want to talk to people like that either. Looking up, Taeha realizes that this is how they manage to keep both sides in check, with armed men scattered across all the buildings. He realizes that if these guys took over the entire city, the 3rd district of Jangseo would become a base for these armed forces. Furthermore, if one of them was a former officer, it is certain they have a very efficient system. Wondering if this is how Korea protects itself. The girl says she can listen to his final words, asking him to be brief and calling him a scoundrel from Oseong or Cheongu. Obviously, this makes the madman angry. However, before he can take a single step, a shot hits the asphalt in front of him. Suri orders him to say where he came from unless he wants to be full of holes. The girl asserts it's better for the brat to be quick. However, this makes the assassin even more irritated. Clenching his fist, he claims he knew this day would come, asserting he cannot believe such a day would unfold in such a rotten way. Her guards warn that it is dangerous, asking if they should kill him. She quickly calls for someone named Hwaryong. Her subordinate jumps from the top of the building, quickly landing in front of the protagonist. The man was huge, literally known as the Tank. The madman stands still, staring at the brat. However, contrary to expectations, Taiha simply tells the guard to move aside. The man stands staring at him, remaining in the same spot. Yet, unexpectedly, he does what the protagonist ordered, leaving Suri completely confused by the guard's attitude. The girl asks how he can betray her like that, while her other subordinates run toward them. Surprisingly, the assassin just takes the milkshake she was drinking. Throwing it away, he says it's no wonder nothing the girl does goes the way she plans. This, obviously, leaves her bewildered, not knowing what just happened. He leans close to her face while looking at the building, whispering something in her ear. She becomes confused and scared by the turn of events. Withdrawing, the protagonist says that, either way, they don't seem worth his time. The girl was still paralyzed, while her men ask if they shouldn't go after him. However, she calmly approaches Hwaryong. The man admits he couldn't feel any kind of threat coming from the protagonist. The girl questions if that was why he let that madman get close to his boss, asserting that her gang is truly united. With a smile, the guy asks if she felt it too, claiming that even he was capable of that. He says it's been a long time since the war, long enough to forget what it's like to see something real. Later, still at the ladies' restaurant, they were working to fit the door back into place. Gray asks his companion to hold it steady while he screws it in. They repair the restaurant entrance. Both announce that everything is in place, claiming the door now closes correctly. While Young-suk asks if he's sure he fixed it right, Gray assures her he did and begs her to give them food. Naturally, she scolds Taiha, stating that if he breaks something again, she will kick him out. The lady was still scolding him because the door was expensive. However, Suri appears and breaks it again. The girl questions what is wrong with that door. Hugging Young-suk, the brat says she missed her and asks how she is doing. Pinching the girl's cheeks, the woman questions when these delinquents will let her door see the light of morning. Seeing this, the protagonist assumes to himself that the girl is completely different from when he met her during the day. Someone puts the door back in place again. Besides fixing the door, Suri says she heard that Baksu laid his hands on the lady last time. She apologizes, stating she broke all his fingers to make sure he never does anything like that again. However, the lady tells her to finish fixing the door and go eat, claiming the girl is nothing but skin and bones. Gray explains to the protagonist that during a war that happened there, Young-suk helped treat many members of Yaburi. She also treated Suri's father several times for free. That's why they consider her their savior. Taiha asks aloud how the lackeys of a gang can treat someone considered their boss's savior so rudely. Obviously, the girl doesn't like hearing that. Looking at her, the protagonist says everyone calls her the boss, but the girl is just a symbolic figure. She leaps up while wrapping several wires around him, focusing especially on his neck. Suri curses him, asserting she has been going easy since the beginning, yet the brat doesn't seem grateful. Smugly, the girl tells him to repeat what he said. The protagonist notices those wires are not normal, realizing their tension is different. Surprising her, the madman claims the girl must know that better than he does. He asserts that among those men positioned inside the buildings when he was there, some seem to have their weapons pointed at a specific spot. Instead of aiming at the intruder, they were aiming at their own boss. He says that while everything appears to be a stalemate externally, she proves to be just a puppet controlled internally. At the moment he approached her, the boy had asked Suri to meet him at the ladies' restaurant, since there were too many spies there. He questions who ordered them to buy the buildings there, asking if it was Oseong. While the girl pulls the wire tighter, the protagonist claims there is only one final alternative, asking if it was Cheongu. The girl pulls the wire, visibly furious, but to her surprise, all the wires snapped. With his dagger in hand, Taiha says he understood the answer. In another place in the city, in a luxurious house, a man was banging on a glass window, begging the director to save him. He asserts that despite the failure of the deal with Lebanon, he ensures that in 2 months he will collect double the revenue. On the other hand, the director was speaking on the phone and asking what had happened. The spy says an intruder approached Suri earlier, claiming he might have noticed them and questioning how to proceed. A cage begins to open with a feline inside. A hungry lion emerges into the same courtyard as that man. Desperate, the guy tells the animal to stay away, begging the director desperately for another chance. However, as expected, the man does nothing, leaving the man to be killed and devoured by the beast. In the photo he received, the protagonist's face was completely exposed, making the director find it interesting. Ingyu orders them to bring the brat to him alive. Taiha remarks that apparently, the one behind the entire 3rd district was indeed Cheon-gu. Furthermore, the reason the girl hasn't dealt with them is that she is being threatened. Suri begins to complain about who this guy is. After all, he cut her wires as if they were nothing, even though they were her best weapons made of Kevlar fiber. The girl indirectly questions his identity. The protagonist assures her that he is simply the best person at killing the Cheon-gu in the entire country. This, obviously, leaves her even more confused. He claims that if Cheon-gu is her problem, he supposes he can help her. Gray reassures the girl that she can trust the protagonist. She is surprised by the lady's arrival as well. Young-suk also asserts that Suri can trust that guy. This leaves her even more astonished, since the woman usually doesn't interfere in anything. With that, she gets off the table. Withdrawing, the girl says that if it were just a matter of killing a few people, everything would have been resolved by now. Irritated, she warns that this will be her last warning, telling Taiha to get out of the neighborhood. She leaves, leaving the 3 in the restaurant. Later, the protagonist and the lady were smoking outside. He thanks her for trying to help him earlier when she asked the girl to trust him regarding taking care of Cheon-gu members. However, Young-suk just says it's the truth, wondering aloud if there is anyone else capable of going against them in that country. The protagonist asks who secretly plotted all that mess within the Cheon-gu. The woman states it was the director of the electric company, Ingyu, assuring him that the worm is always behind everything. She informs him that when the former head of the Yaburi, Suri's father, nearly died in the redevelopment war, that man took him to the hospital. But only the 2 of them know about that. The rest of the neighborhood thinks he passed away, because if they find out, there will be resistance, and they will all end up dead. Young-suk admits that, preferably, she would love for everything to be resolved without Suri's father being killed, asking if Taiha could help. Both fall silent for a moment. Someone reports in as B1 and alerts that the target is in their sights. It is questioned if there were any conversations. The spy says yes, stating that Young-suk asked the intruder for help. Claiming the man is harder to read, he says he doesn't know what his answer was. This was a mercenary from the private company, Peak. The person on the other end of the line raises the possibility of the guy being a mercenary. B1 says that in any case, he just needs to take him alive. His colleague asks about the woman and the boy from the restaurant, but the mercenary declares he doesn't need them, stating he will simply kill everyone. However, Taiha was right behind him. The guy becomes extremely frightened upon noticing his presence. The protagonist quickly strikes his hand, preventing him from using the weapon, and rapidly closes the distance between them. His colleague questions what that was, asking if B1 is okay and demanding a quick response. However, the mercenary was still trying to pull out the knife that had been driven into his hand. On the other hand, the boy calmly walks to the position where his enemy had been watching him earlier. Picking up the radio that was lying on the ground, he claims to be B1 and tells them not to worry. Saying goodbye, he says he will see them soon. After some time, the following day, in the hospital separated from the Cheon-gu, a guy is eating something while stating he had requested that all contracts be completed yesterday, questioning if Suri took his words seriously. The girl says she is trying to convince everyone to sign the papers, stating that this way they can prevent problems later. Her father was breathing through machines, clearly with great difficulty. Ingyu says he truly doesn't see useless people as human beings. While stabbing something into the man's leg, the madman assures her that they are just pieces of meat in his view. Obviously, the girl is shocked and screams at him. Still striking her father with the fork, the director says the machines are beeping wildly, claiming this proves he is alive and stating he is doing his best to keep that piece of meat breathing. Suri, being very nervous, assures him she understands, saying she will provide all the signed documents no matter the cost. She trembled as she begged Ingyu to stop, claiming she will do exactly as requested. He grabs the girl by the face while she begs for him to just leave her father in peace. The madman calls her a lady of the night, assuring her that if she follows all his orders, everything will be fine. Obviously, she was furious, but she couldn't do anything. The weirdo says he loves seeing that defiant look, stating it's worth taming her. Showing her a paper, the guy asks if she met that man yesterday. Looking at the floor, she still seems a bit dazed. The girl observes the photo of the protagonist while Ingyu claims he wants to meet him, asking her to bring him by the end of that same day. She stops crying, still looking at the photo. Leaving, the guy tells her not to forget, stating that the girl has a lot to lose if she betrays them. A doctor bows in front of the director. The guy walks carelessly to the elevator. While he calls someone who doesn't answer, Another person was also present in the elevator. Ingyu was irritated, questioning what those delinquents were doing not to answer him, stating he sent them to find Taiha. He continues complaining while looking at the other person inside. As expected, it was the protagonist who just observes the director. The guy tries to say something, but the boy simply cuts off his ear. Not quite understanding what happened, Ingyu looks down, seeing the piece that was taken from him. Obviously, he begins to scream desperately. Taiha assures him he heard about that through rumors, saying that, apparently, the director was after him. The guy asks if the protagonist even knows who he is, trying to hit him with a punch. Ingyu questions how the boy dares to lay a hand on him. Recalling his conversation with Youngsuk, she told him that during the redevelopment war, Cheongu hired mercenaries, men from the Peak Company, ruthless assassins who do anything for money. The protagonist questions if the director really thought everything would be resolved if he just threw more money at it. Taking the mercenaries' dog tags, Taiha declares that if the guy wants to shed blood, he has to be prepared to see his own flow. Shoving all the tags into the madman's mouth, the psychopath assures Ingyu that no matter where or when, he will find him and stab him once a day from then on. With that, he tells him to get ready and set, stating that the race starts now. After some time, the guy ran desperately, wondering what was happening. He falls to the ground while the protagonist approaches him calmly. The director screamed, begging him to stop, crying while imploring him not to come any closer. Taiha had killed all the security guards, hence he was completely calm. The boy pierces the man's leg. He tells the guy to stop being dramatic, assuring him that the femoral region has many muscles, so he won't suffer a serious injury. While pulling out the blade, the protagonist asserts that compared to the other places he has hit him, that wasn't so bad. Cleaning his knife, he says he will see him tomorrow. After some time, a festival painting appears. Cheong drinks wine while informing that out of the 15 directors, 7 are his allies, 6 are supporters of the vice president, and the remaining 2 are impartial, stating that in difficult times they should stick together. He claims it's a shame. Another person agrees, saying they can hardly imagine how distressed the late chairman would be by this. They say that the 2 impartial ones can only be persuaded with action, assuring that the younger ones are outperforming the vice president. However, unexpectedly, Chiang calls for Ingyu, saying he heard he is working on the Jiangxiao redevelopment case. He questions if he can expect good things by the time of the meeting. Nervous, the director just agrees, giving him total certainty of it. However, the man begins to laugh, asking him not to be so formal and questioning the reason for all that nervousness. In a terrifying way, the madman tells his companion to try his best so they can avoid any future hostility. While placing his hand over his latest wound, Ingyu assures him he doesn't want such a thing. Later, he heads toward his car, sitting in the back seat while in great pain. Recalling the protagonist's words while he pierced him with his dagger, the guy curses him, claiming he will destroy him next time. His driver questions if he should take him home. The director kicks the seat, questioning if that kind of question is really necessary. Causing Ingyu to lock everything that can be locked, Taiha appears from the passenger seat, questioning if the man has committed a crime. Obviously, the madman is in disbelief that he managed to get there. Taking his blade, the protagonist says that apparently that leg lacks manners, quickly stabbing it into the guy's knee. This makes the director scream desperately. After that, calmly, the psychopath exits normally and says he will be back tomorrow. Terrified, Ingyu asks who he is and why he keeps doing this, asserting that he won't get what he wants if the guy doesn't tell him. With that, night falls. Taiha says it is already the 7th day, and even though he is stabbing him in non-fatal areas, the director must surely be at his limit. He claims to Suri that even if they hand him over, her group will never be the same. They ask what the protagonist was thinking by going after the director, stating it was very difficult to drive them out. One of them asks his boss for permission to kill him, claiming that if they don't turn him in, another war will break out. Suri questions why he did that and why he came there to tell them. However, Taiha simply says that Error 307 exists, stating that this error prevents people from using online banking entirely, an error usually encountered by journalists. Furthermore, the internet speed there is below 10 kbps, as if everyone were grinding their teeth waiting to be hacked. He asks her why that is. However, the 2 guards state he understands nothing, claiming the guy is just an outsider. Even knowing all of this is because of Cheon-gu, she still stands firm for her families. He asserts that if she only wants to protect her family, they should have stayed out of the way, questioning why they didn't fight back. However, Suri just hangs her head, not knowing what to say. Leaving, Taiha says the director will try to handle it alone since he cannot disturb the board, telling them to get ready. Hwaryong asks what the boy gains from all this. He claims he will earn the title of director at Cheon-gu. Later, In the same house where Ingyu released the lion to eat his subordinate, a man says this is a tragedy for both of them. The CEO of the mercenary company Peak says he never imagined the powerful director would be suffering such humiliation from an outsider. However, Ingyu tells the guy to shut up, claiming he doesn't accept this because he likes it. While smoking, he curses the protagonist, saying that if it weren't for the board meeting, this would have been resolved already. In-sik asks why he doesn't just mention it, but the guy fervently denies the possibility, assuring him that they call that meeting symbolic. He claims it will be able to completely reorganize Cheon-gu. He asserts he has always maintained a friendship with Cheong, and that after he is finally appointed, he will have a sort of god by his side. He says the CEO better give it his all too, since if the project fails, the guy will also be punished for being associated with him. With that, In-sik says that Madman managed to handle his men, so he did a background check on his own. He questions if Ingyu has heard of the Salerno from Italy. The guy admits he has no idea, asking if it's some kind of mafia. The CEO says yes, claiming they are crazy. He says the boy is one of them, going by the name Vendetta, being their best executioner. The only thing known is that he is Asian, claiming that since he is a senior director of Cheon-gu, he must have a lot of money. In-sik questions how much he needs. He says if a nuclear bomb has appeared, they will need to create their own bomb, declaring that someone who rivals him has been called to Korea. He says that Jerome is a guy who has crossed paths with this Vendetta twice before, but survived to tell the tale. However, the director says he should have found someone the protagonist actually fears, not someone who just managed to survive. Nevertheless, the man explains that the boy is infamous because he chases a traitor even to the ends of the earth. He recounts that Vendetta once went into the Amazon rainforest to hunt a traitor, surviving only on insects. Ingyu questions if that doesn't just make Jerome someone who is good at running away, but In-sik says if that were the case, Jerome wouldn't have come immediately. The CEO informs him that the commission fee is $700,000 up front, $300,000 later, and another $300,000 for brokerage, claiming it was very difficult for him and his men to bring that guy in. The director questions how many men In-sik still has. He assures him that if he wants his company to participate, the payment will have to be doubled. The director makes a call, ordering them to take 200 kilos of banknotes to the first floor of the basement. With that, the elevator door opens. Inside, something sparkled with the reflection of the light. He questioned the CEO if it really made sense to spend $1.3 million to kill one man. Ingyu says that there are 200 kilos of 50,000 won notes there, each weighing about 0.97 g, stating that the guy is capable of doing the math. Assuring him that it was more than enough to retire on, he says they need to have a productive conversation. Someone was observing the floor plan of a certain location. Gray says that it is the floor plan of the director's property, informing him that he contacted a security company and bought the layout. Taiha asks how he managed to buy that. The boy says that other than the Cheon-gu insurance company itself, all the others make trades for money. After all, Cheon-gu is always ready to replace anyone who doesn't turn a profit. In other words, their employees have no loyalty. Seeing this, the protagonist says his grandfather would have risen from his grave if he heard that. The boy explains that most of Ingyu's schedule is sent from headquarters, so it will be risky, but the best time is at 10 p.m. However, they realize they don't have the floor plan for the first floor of the basement. Gray says he is sure one exists since there are stairs and elevators, but he supposes the plan might be with the director himself. He notices that the phrase B1 GRC appears a few times, and based on his studies, that is a type of cement used in construction. Since it is highly resistant to moisture, chemicals, and the weather, it is used in soundproof walls and even in zoos. At this, the protagonist remains pensive for a moment. Taiha asks the boy to do him a favor, and Gray says he's listening. Vendetta approaches the boy and whispers something in his ear. He asks why so suddenly, but the protagonist just says he supposes he will need it. Gray says he has that at home, but he never thought the guy was the type to use those things. However, Taiha claims there isn't a type for these things, asking the brat to keep an eye on the CCTV for any intruders. After that, he leaves the restaurant calmly. Someone asks if he is going out again. Waryong questions if the madman is going to provoke the director again. The protagonist says he finds it hard to believe someone being stabbed every 24 hours would see it as a mere provocation. He informs him that he has been there since the revolution of the 90s, and because of that, he knows how to identify true talent. Even so, he has never heard of him before, asking who the boy is. Taiha questions if anything would change if the man knew who he was. The big guy seems to get a bit irritated by this, warning that if he refuses to explain, he will be considered a threat to the boss and he'll have to eliminate him right there. The protagonist just observes with indifference. He says the man has an idea of his opponent's skills, yet wants to fight fairly instead of planning for an advantage. claiming that it appears he was part of the Oseong gang. As he leaves, Vendetta says he also trusts his skills, which is why he will leave that place in his care while he is away. He guarantees he will personally compensate him in case of redevelopment, offering 10 times what was initially offered. Night finally falls. The director's mansion was quiet as always. The protagonist had managed to get past the entrance security. With caution, the assassin opens the door slowly, using his knife for leverage. Soon he begins to walk through the rooms looking for his target. Seeing how quiet everything was and with the lights out, Taiha supposes that maybe Deary hasn't returned yet. However, he notices the stairs Gray suspected led to the first floor of the basement. Wondering if that was the entrance, the madman simply begins to descend the staircase, ending up in front of a glass wall showing a lion's habitat. To his surprise, the door slams shut. Ingyu speaks through a loudspeaker, claiming it's good to see him again. Obviously, Vendetta realizes it was an ambush. The director says he suspected from the start that he had gotten hold of his schedule. After all, the boy always knew when to attack, calling the assassin a loathsome insect. With that, the lion's cage opens. The guy says it doesn't matter how skilled the protagonist is with his knives, he will never be able to face 2 lions. Logically, the felines begin to roar, showing they are the predators. Ingyu states he couldn't do anything in the 3rd district because of the Oseong thugs, but now he has the perfect excuse. He declares that while he is eaten alive, that place will collapse as armed assassins infiltrate. He assures that tonight, the boy and all the scum of the 3rd neighborhood will be eliminated. Calling the lions by name, the director orders both to attack him. With that, the lions begin to approach him, quickly running toward their prey. Obviously, even the protagonist feels fear in a moment like this. However, he pulls out a fire spitter, handgun, and even criticizes their names, saying both are males. He finishes both off with bullets. Seeing this, Ingyu no longer knows what to do, as his plan has gone completely wrong. The director asks if that was a gun, questioning why the psychopath wasn't using his knives. However, Taiha says daggers are for humans, asking if the guy thinks he's in a comic book to imagine someone would do that. Speaking on the phone, he contacts Gray, noting that he is not without communication. Cutting the splint from his arm, he warns that an attack is coming soon, asking the boy to tell Suri to get ready. At this, Ingyu begins to tremble with fear and nervousness, recalling the story of how he entered the Amazon forest just to hunt a traitor, surviving for a month consuming only insects. He freezes more and more as he sees the calmness with which the protagonist speaks on the phone. Vendetta, in a terrifying manner, looks at the camera, stating that while Gray does his part, he will hunt down the director. The boy warns everyone that Cheongu is heading their way, specifically alerting them about the Peak Company. He confirms that the message ends with Taiha asking them to wait for his return, as he is going to capture Ingyu. Furthermore, since that fight was inevitable, the best choice is to face them head-on. If they don't, it will be the end for everyone. The Yaburi members are outraged, claiming that the swindler must have fled after causing all that mess. Gray tries to defend his friend, assuring them that he will return, but the men tell him to shut up. They say the brat doesn't even know what the last war was like, mentioning that children his age died, leaving their parents in mourning to this day. Stopping the boy, Youngsuk also guarantees everyone that Taiha will return. Some question what that man is to the lady, but another person declares that it's enough. The advisor, Suyeon, orders everyone to be silent, stating that this is not a decision to be made by them. He asks his boss what they should do. The girl was obviously also irritated and worried. Suri says she didn't see the last war because by the time she returned, it was already over. Leaving them confused, the girl says she was afraid of losing her father, and because of that, she became Cheon-gu's puppet. Apologizing for deceiving them, she asserts that now is the time to end it all. Therefore, all members of the Yaburi gang must join together and drive Cheon-gu out of there once and for all. Insik informs them that the director's plan is to kill everyone residing in the 3rd district. Since no owner has a right to significant apartments, the construction company can obtain greater profits by selling luxury units. Even if the truce with the Oseong prevents them from attacking, with the appearance of the intruder Vendetta and the assassin pursuing him, the story changes. His men remark that, apparently, the assassin is bait. The bald man confirms this, claiming that the despicable Cheon-gu is good at what he does, warning that it is strictly necessary for them to stay out of the fight until the Oseong gang arrives, since Vendetta and that guy will be the ones responsible. Jerome was observing everything unconcernedly, admitting that he initially expected nothing. He says it's actually starting to captivate him again. Asserting that he smells war, he says Korea seems like a very interesting country. The company's CEO gives the order to launch the drones. With that, a van is shown in an alleyway, and another in a parking lot, surrounded by combat drones. All of them had bombs attached to their frames. Insik says that unlike the previous war, they will no longer need to limit themselves to small arms. He laughs, claiming they are mercenaries. As such, as long as there is money, there are no rules, ensuring they win every battle. As a car travels at high speed on a highway, Ingyu questions the CEO whether his men are on guard, desperately asking him to confirm it correctly. The man tells him to relax, assuring the director that he must be more protected than the president since 70% of his men are on guard duty. He starts kicking the back of the driver's seat, telling the bald man to say that after being stabbed in a public sauna. He orders them to just monitor the surroundings, claiming that Psychopath threatened to hunt him down. The protagonist was inside a car. Ingyu notices and says that vendetta is approaching. Taiha says to himself that installing trackers on all the director's cars was something that paid off. Furthermore, he is worried about how Gray and the others will handle things in the district, claiming he needs to finish this soon. In one of the security cars, a guard warns the driver that the assassin is right behind them. The man questions how that madman knew they were there. While preparing to fire, the soldier asks how fearless this vendetta guy is. With that, he fires a burst through the windshield toward the driver. Somehow, the protagonist manages to survive without being hit. However, his car seems to lose control. The security guard warns the others that the black sedan behind him is the target. A bus aligns itself with Taiha's vehicle. He is surprised to see it, while they command no one to lower their guard. Several soldiers prepare their rifles through the window, stating they won't give him a chance to catch his breath. However, the protagonist quickly slams on the brakes while throwing himself against the barrier. He breaks one of the doors while simultaneously jumping from the car, using it as a sort of board on the asphalt. Obviously, his car flips further ahead. He looks back, startled, trying to figure out the next step. After all, besides the various cars, 2 motorcycles were approaching with armed soldiers. Thus, he uses the door to knock one of them down. Jumping and landing a knee strike to break the other guard's helmet, he quickly finishes both off and steals one of the motorcycles for himself, accelerating as much as he could to catch the director. For some reason, one of the escort vehicles was a car carrier truck with a ramp. One of the guards says he has a visual on him, telling his companions to open fire. Like Neo from The Matrix, he dodges all the bullets, entering their blind spot and heading toward the ramp. Realizing it's time to play GTA, he accelerates even more to gain momentum and jumps over the truck. Still in the air, he already prepares for another daring move. Skillfully jumping from the motorcycle toward another vehicle, he lands on top of one of the security cars. Carefully, he stands up and stays on his feet. Taking a deep breath and preparing himself, he takes his 2 daggers in hand and says that from now on, the real fun begins. Since the guards couldn't risk hitting their own colleagues, they merely watched the protagonist, noting that he didn't even have a gun. The madmen decide to speed up, asserting that as soon as he moves to the side of the car, they can crush him. Obviously, Taiha can hear the engine noise increasing. He lifts his head, listening intently and waiting for the right moment. Thus, Vendetta simply gives a slight hop to lift off from the car. Consequently, he heads directly toward the bus. The protagonist quickly prepares to enter through the windshield, taking advantage of the guard's difficulty in processing what just happened. With that, he breaks the glass and enters the vehicle. The soldiers obviously weren't expecting something like this, so they could barely react. Taking advantage of the situation, Vendetta quickly delivers fatal cuts to them. He passes through them like a brutal hurricane, literally disconnecting all of his opponents' heads. With that, he breaks the window separating the driver and sits beside him. Obviously, the guy doesn't know what to do in that situation. He could barely fathom how a motorcyclist who was flying just a moment ago could have ended up there. Handing over some money, Taiha apologizes and asks if the guy could speed up just a little more, assuring him it won't take long. In the district, it is reported that drones have been confirmed within a 600-meter radius, claiming 16 of them have been spotted. Gray warns that they have separated to hit them at a lower altitude. Furthermore, based on their speed, they appear to be FPVs. Suion says it's exactly as they expected. A few hours earlier, Suri had questioned the Major about how the last war was fought. The guy informs her that Chiang and Oseong only fought at predetermined times. She says it's ironic since they aren't in medieval Europe. However, she asks why the war was contained within the district. After all, whenever one side left, the other did the same. The Major explains that only small arms were used, and that only the Peak used them, since the 2 gangs didn't want to draw attention. After all, if a monster like that reappeared, no one would survive to see another day. With that, the girl remains pensive for a moment. Suion says that's why the Peak tried to end things before they hit Oseong's radar, but it would take too long to take the district. The advisor says they are likely equipped with RPGs or grenades to self-destruct, warning that they need to prepare. The drones begin to fly over the region, Some soldiers spot them and prepare to fire with an anti-drone weapon to bring them down. At this, some begin to stall in the air. One of the soldiers celebrates the hit. Another fires his rifle while cursing the mercenaries. The bald man is informed that they lost control of the drones on the 1st and 7th streets, assuming the enemy might have an anti-drone device. Insik questions the reason for such a hypothesis. His subordinate says the signals were lost only in certain locations. Obviously, the CEO becomes furious, asking if the Yaburi have radars. Furthermore, an anti-drone weapon isn't something you see every day. Laughing, he assures them that won't be enough to stop them. Suddenly, Gray is incredibly surprised. They try to understand what is happening with the drones, reporting that there are many of them, assuming there are at least 100. Insik asks if they really thought his company would start a war with only 10 to 20 drones. Anti-drone devices only block a small area. When you point it elsewhere, the signal returns. Now, with hundreds of drones scattered across the sky, the man wonders how many they can actually suppress. With the previous war resulting in the renovation of most buildings in the district, a simple command allows drones to be sent anywhere. The CEO says he is anxious to see how many survive with 800 explosive drones after them. Someone warns over the radio that drones are infiltrating through the ventilation, noting that they apparently know the layout of the house. Suyeon orders everyone out of there, claiming those have already been programmed, so there's no way to stop them. Smiling, the major assures him that the boss is already on her way there. Someone calls the bald man and says there is something strange in the sky. Insik looks up, confused. The sky seems normal as always. However, unexpectedly, several lights appear. They intensify more and more. With that, several explosions begin to occur. On top of one of the buildings in front of the drones was Suri, trying to draw the attention of as many as she could. Rapidly manipulating her wires, she entangles them completely, making them stop. Thus, she leaps away while causing them to explode. Insik is terrified, asking who she is and asserting that something like that never happened during the last war. Some time ago, her subordinates had asked what that was. She apologized for not telling them sooner, affirming that it is her true weapon. The girl says they might be surprised, but as she had said, she was elsewhere during the last war. She recounts that she was away learning to use that weapon to help her father, but fate made her arrive too late. Therefore, she wants to set things right this time, asserting that they will ensure those scoundrels never step foot in their neighborhood again. Suyeon is proud, asking Gizeob to see how his daughter has grown. The bald man orders another batch to be brought out, telling them to overwhelm them with numbers and ordering them to blow up everyone in their path. However, when his soldier tries to respond, something seems to surprise him. Suddenly, someone hits the van behind him. Someone was informing Hwaryong that there must be a command center for the drones there. The big man confirms they were right. With that, the CEO becomes nervous upon seeing him. The tank heads toward the bald man, asserting that he will deal with that guy first. 10 years ago, a man questioned if his friend really wanted to form a gang. The friend replied that times were changing. Instead of paying a gang for protection, it was easier to create their own. The major says he is still a soldier, and besides, there is no one there as good at fighting as Gizeob. However, the man assures him that he is not gathering people to beat anyone up, but merely as a way to facilitate negotiations. With a smile, he asks his friend what he thinks of the name Yaburi. Back in the present, the mercenaries wondered how Hwaryong had found that place. The soldiers report that Team Alpha has identified a threat. The big man runs faster and faster, lowering his head to avoid the shots. Irritated, their captain orders them to stop aiming for the head and hit his feet. However, the tank had already pinned one of them against the wall. His companion couldn't believe what was happening. With that, the big man quickly hits the second mercenary, also launching him against the wall, already unconscious. A sniper reports that the Team Alpha threat is in his sights. The man admits that the man is a monster. However, before he could do anything, his body is completely sliced. As expected, this was done by the girl, who was quickly running across the rooftops. Insik notices this and curses her furiously. She notifies everyone that she has just taken care of another sniper. Suyeon congratulates her on the job and warns that there are likely more, asking her to stay alert. Furthermore, they didn't know about her existence, so the snipers are likely in places with an excellent view looking down. The place where the snipers are grouped is probably the same place where the drones are stationed. Gray announces that he found the possible location. He states it is in a public parking lot on the other side of the community center, in a black van. The girl says she understands and is already heading there, but something catches her attention. Hwaryong had been hit by a shot. However, his nickname isn't Tank for nothing. The madman hadn't suffered a scratch. As he approached, the man says that in these last 20 years of bloodshed, He only survived as a mercenary in that country in one way. In-sik assures her that he will kill the girl after finishing off all of them first. Tearing his coat, the man reveals his robotic arm, stating that he will finish the bald man right then and there. Elsewhere, a car falls onto an overpass. Luckily, it doesn't flip over upon reaching the road below. The director was on his knees in front of the protagonist, calling him a madman. He questions what Vendetta wants with him and why he is doing all of this. However, the madman says he already told him he plans to stab him once a day, driving his knife into the guy's shoulder. Ingyu asks if Taiha is crazy to be doing something like that for such a stupid reason. The protagonist takes his cell phone, stating that it would be too much trouble to find him if he went abroad, so he will take him to the district. However, the director says it's already too late. He assures him that by this time, that neighborhood has nothing left in its streets. He declares that he ordered his men to exterminate everyone, including children and the elderly, saying he told them to show no discrimination. He informs him that he spent over 100 billion won, asking if the boy has any idea what that means. He says they must destroy everything within an hour using bombs, missiles, or whatever they find necessary. The protagonist says he heard that many people died in the previous war by getting caught in the fight between the two gangs. He claims that, apparently, the guy still hasn't understood why he is only going after him. He asserts that there is no one more deadly than someone who has lost their family. Since people like that have nothing left to lose, they risk everything without feeling fear. However, there's a group of people who are even stronger than those, the ones who have a family to look after. At this, the director remembers that day in the hospital. Taiha says he is sure the director has also seen the eyes of those who would do anything to protect their family, with an agony that rips through their lungs and a fury that destroys their hearts, all held in by difficult breaths that promise revenge. People like that are strong, and the one who made them that way is none other than himself. Therefore, the protagonist tells the guy to shut his mouth and follow him in silence. However, Ingyu asks if the boy really thinks things like family and revenge are actually stronger than money. Back at Hwaryong's fight, the mercenary admits he never would have imagined he was a former Oseong member, the 16th in command of the gang during the last war. While dodging shots, the big man says that is in the past. Swinging his axe, In-sik asks his opponent not to disparage himself, stating that everyone knows the meaning of that rank. Anyone within the top 20 in Oseong is considered one of the strongest in the nation. Suddenly, Suri's wires emerge in the middle of the battle. The girl quickly manages to entangle the bald man completely. While cursing the girl, the guy wonders what kind of wire that is that he can't even cut. She says his name, claiming she heard he was the one who killed the most in her entire city. Cursing him, Suri promises to take his head to quiet the grieving hearts of all those who remain. With that, Hwaryong leaps toward him to deliver the final blow. The CEO tries to ask them to wait. However, to his luck, Jerome appears and saves him from there. This obviously surprises the big man. Not much different from him, Suri also doesn't understand what just happened. The guy asserts that because he chose toys like drones to win, that is the reason the bald man finds himself in that situation. Picking up a crowbar, the assassin asks if he is wrong. Looking directly at the two of them, the man asserts that he is going to begin. Still confused, the girl wonders if this man is a new enemy, noting that even though In-sik was completely entangled in her wires, that madman pulled him out of there as if it were nothing. The leader of the mercenaries asks what the crazy guy was doing appearing so late. However, Jerome merely says that their base is 350 meters to the northwest, on the 4th floor of a ruined building, and tells the bald man to go. Before he could finish speaking, Hwaryong forces the assassin against the wall. However, the tank seems surprised by something. The guy was laughing while saying he would stay there to have a little fun. In-sik desperately screams into the radio, ordering them to put all the drones in the air. His subordinate tries to argue, claiming they don't even know where the enemy's control center is. However, their leader says it doesn't matter, since his best man is right there, ordering them to kill everyone while Jerome keeps the guy occupied. Suri moves toward the man, saying he cannot do something like that. This distracts the big man for a moment, creating an opening for the assassin to land a kick and launch him far away. Obviously, Hwaryong finds it somewhat difficult to stop his momentum. Nervous, he admits he didn't expect the guy to be able to throw 120 kilos so far, noting that, based on his form, that wasn't even his full strength. The big man assumes that this guy is truly promising. The girl calls out to her friend, but he asks his boss not to worry, asserting that he will handle things there. The girl says she will deal with the drones, asking him to take that man down and bring him to the base. She says it's an order, telling him to finish things there in the next 5 minutes, because if the peak arrive first, it's the end. However, Hwaryong becomes extremely startled by something. Jerome appears beside the girl, questioning if she's already leaving and asking her to stay a little longer, claiming it would be more fun that way. Suddenly, the big man lunges, preparing to punch him. Landing a heavy blow on the assassin, he sends him flying. The man again asks her to leave it to him, assuring her he will catch up soon. The girl simply nods and begins to run as fast as possible. Hwaryong mentally admits that if she had hesitated, he would have cursed at her until she left. He is surprised that she isn't losing her composure, even though it's her first war, stating that it must be in her blood. However, Jerome begins to laugh, questioning if that isn't a surprise. He assumes that if he takes a few more punches like that, he really might end up dead. The big man complains about how he survived a direct hit to the chest, questioning where the guy came from. His opponent says he's from the Philippines, informing him that he learned Korean out of pure interest and asking how his pronunciation is. Both stand face to face, staring each other down. Jerome admits he has found his life boring lately, claiming he misses fights and things of that nature. Introducing himself, he says the two are going to have a lot of fun. With that, the madman punches Hwaryong in the face. As expected, Hwaryong retaliates. Preparing another blow, he also introduces himself, launching a sequence of attacks all over the enemy's body. As he takes advantage of an opening and lands an uppercase, the assassin declares that he loves this. Logically, such a blow leaves Hwaryong disoriented. Before he can even regain his senses, the psychopath lands another. While still taking a beating, the big man remembers someone who discovered his identity. Recalling the protagonist, he remembers how Taiha trusted his skills and said he would leave everything to him while away. Clenching his fist, he wonders why that man would trust his skills. He remembers that during the district's first war, he was the leader of the Oseong gang's main squad when it was still new. Giseob, the head of Yaburi, was a close friend who worked with him for the gang before retiring. At the time, he asked his friend to trust him, assuring him he would ensure everyone moved into an apartment with a great view. However, Suri's father argued that most people there are elderly, so they couldn't wait 10 years just to move back. He said he would fight, and if he died along the way, at least he'd know he tried to do something. But before anything, he asked for a favor. If he died, he would leave what came after in Hwaryong's hands. Even badly hurt, Hwaryong stands up once more, shouting as he tries to hit his opponent. However, Jerome manages to maneuver and counterattack, while the big man admits he joined the Oseong gang to know what it was to be strong. However, the truth he found only brought him despair. A world full of talents that rose above him like mountains impossible to conquer. Upon reaching the top 16, the man finally realized that was the limit of his abilities. However, his friend's death illuminated something he didn't know. He admits that what made him stronger wasn't the mountains, but the people he needed to protect. Jerome didn't stop landing blows on him, but surprisingly, Hwaryong grabs the assassin's head. Running while pulling Jerome against his body, he proclaims he is known as the Tank for a reason. He is the one who clears the path so others can follow right behind. His enemy seemed surprised by the turn of events. Smiling, the weirdo says that Fist is full of conviction, claiming he thought from the beginning they were just having fun. Appearing behind him, the madman says if the man is going to take it seriously, he will have to do the same. Picking up his crowbar, Jerome admits it was fun, informing him that he will make him pass away without feeling pain. With that, Hwaryong is completely paralyzed in shock. A massive horizontal cut tears through him, even slicing the wall in front of him, causing it to start falling on top of him. Someone praises the man for all his hard work. Unexpectedly, Taiha appears and slices the wall, preventing it from crushing him. The protagonist tells Hwaryong to let him take it from here, thanking him once again for all his hard work. With that, he turns his gaze back to Jerome. Staring him down, the assassin says that vendetta is quite late. The boy tells him that from now on, he will be his opponent. But first, Taiha asks if his companion can still move, even with those injuries. Visibly covered in several deep cuts, Hwaryong continues by saying that wasn't enough, claiming he is fine, assuring him that they would have to kill him to make him stop moving. Thus, the protagonist asks him to walk 1 block, informing him that there will be a black car near a lamppost. Inside the trunk, Ingyu will be waiting for him. Declaring that he will resolve things there, he asks the man to guide the car to their hideout. Jerome asks if they really think he will let the big guy go so easily. However, Taiha throws a manhole cover toward his feet. As expected, the guy simply defends himself. The protagonist begins to head toward his opponent. Smiling, the madman questions if he is being serious. He quickly uses his crowbar to catch the manhole cover while it's still in the air. Skillfully launching it back, he becomes increasingly excited. Vendetta ran toward him as fast as possible, barely managing to dodge it. Both stop a certain distance from each other. However, Jerome goes on the attack, appearing more and more thirsty for the adrenaline. The protagonist says that, apparently, the guy really has been going around claiming to be his rival. The weirdo questions if it isn't true. With that, They begin to exchange blows at an absurd speed. However, Taiha says the only thing that guy is a stalker, but the assassin keeps laughing, asserting that it's all the same thing. Several explosions were happening in the sky. Suri was taking down as many drones as she could, exhausted. The girl admits there are too many drones there. Furthermore, she can't waste much time on this. Suddenly, it is reported over the radio that headquarters is exchanging fire with the peak about 50 meters from the base. Gray says the situation is dangerous, but their position makes it difficult for enemies to approach, asking them not to worry. He asserts that as soon as that man returns, that war will end, so they only need to hold out until then. Listening to these words, the girl wonders if he could be talking about someone specific. With that, she hears the sound of a car. Inside the trunk was the director. Even though he was incredibly hurt, Hwar Yang went there to fetch him. Obviously, the guy was increasingly afraid of what fate might have in store for him. The big man grabs him by the face like a doll. He wondered if the way to end the war was to crush that worm's skull right then and there. However, if that man loses, Suri won't be able to face Jerome alone, noting that maybe it's better to ask the Oseong for help. With that, he begins to squeeze Ingyu's face harder and harder, telling himself that this is the one guilty for everything, and that, after his death, Peak and Jerome will have to retreat. Meanwhile, Taiha and his opponent pass by fighting above him. The assassin was holding back the protagonist's blades. Both begin to clash their weapons again, coming face to face and staring each other down once more. They exchange another frantic sequence of blows. Vendetta manages to land a kick to his enemy's stomach, sending him flying. The guy uses his crowbar as a support to stop. Standing up, he admits he was surprised to learn his rival was in Korea, but he asserts that maybe he's starting to understand why he came here. Destroying the air conditioner where he had jammed the tip of the crowbar, he leaves the protagonist surprised by saying that for assassins like them, that place is a paradise. Trying to hit him with it, Jerome asks if Vendetta doesn't agree. Obviously, the boy feels a certain difficulty escaping the attack. As a last resort, Taiha throws himself backward and crashes through an apartment. However, his opponent already expected this, laughing madly while trying to strike him again. Suyeon questions if Gray is sure everything will end when that man arrives. The boy says it is an absolute certainty, driving the major crazy as he asks who he is and why they have so much confidence in him. Gray questions if the advisor remembers that the news called the Cheon-gu family royalty, informing him that the terrorist was Taiha. However, he asks the man to forget the words he just heard, asserting that he is not actually a terrorist who killed the royal family, since, even though he left, that man is still part of that royal family, declaring that calling him the heir to the throne makes more sense. In his head, Vendetta remembers the first time their paths crossed. Both were in England and had the same target. Suddenly, a massive explosion occurs in the tunnel walls. The protagonist and Jerome were fighting. The guy had fallen onto the train tracks. He leaned on his crowbar, looking down, appearing surprised, realizing his legs had been completely broken. Because of this, he couldn't get out of there, and the train was approaching. The guy even looks up, hoping for some help from Taiha. However, the boy does nothing, claiming he was certain he had killed him at that moment. But then, some time passes, and a cargo plane was crossing the skies. 2 people begin to fall. The protagonist says that once he was dealing with a traitor trying to flee to Russia. That's when they crossed paths once more, fighting in midair. They begin to exchange blows while in free fall until Vendetta manages to hit his vest, cutting the parachute trigger. Placing his foot on Jerome's chest, he pushed him downward. However, he didn't die that time either. On the contrary, Jerome seems to get stronger and stronger after their confrontations. The madman keeps laughing, stating that the protagonist's strike wasn't enough, claiming it was due to a very subtle difference. He notices that the strikes from Taiha's right hand are weaker than those from his left. With this, Jerome advances rapidly against Taiha, saying that Vendetta failed to kill him despite several opportunities, including this last blow. The guy lands a fiercely powerful attack. The protagonist realizes that his right arm has started to tremble after the charge, as it was the one broken during his revenge. Taking advantage of this brief distraction, the madman appears at his rear, questioning if a guy of his caliber really injured his arm. The boy manages to escape the attack while his opponent says that after his brief experience in that country, he can even understand him. Jerome says it would be crazy to assume that place isn't crowded with good fighters after creating a lawless environment by killing the president. He states that, even so, the best among them all is still Vendetta, since he is the only one who leaves him on the brink of death, only for him to get stronger and stronger. The guy begins to cut the water tank with the tip of his crowbar, making a large tear in its structure and throwing that piece against his opponent. Taiha has no time to react. The assassin leaps, preparing for the final blow while taking advantage of the enemy's vulnerability. He lands an incredibly powerful attack, kicking up a cloud of smoke. He lands on the ground calmly. However, to his surprise, the protagonist was not there. Wondering how the boy managed to escape that, Jerome begins to tremble with rage, stating he clearly saw him being hit and realizing he can vanish from his sight easily. He deflects one of the daggers his opponent threw. Jerome declares that Vendetta has failed once again and lost another opportunity. However, the protagonist interrupts him, assuring him that this time he will make sure he has finished him. By the time the blade finally hits the ground, Taiha was already standing in front of his opponent. The guy couldn't understand what just happened, questioning if his rival had always been so fast. The assassin Vendetta unleashes a slash that splits everything around him in half. Taiha says it's just like him, stating that he also grew in the face of death, finishing his rival right then and there. On the other hand, Suri was running over the buildings desperately. She says that according to the radio, this is the last batch of drones, claiming she needs to end everything as soon as possible and return to the base. The girl becomes confused seeing two men carrying a body. One of them notices her presence. Paralyzed, she wonders if these are more adversaries. However, the guy speaks her name, stating he is from the Oseong Gang Special Forces. While they say they are under the orders of their captain Huimin, the captain himself appears in front of the protagonist. He warns that he has received orders to kill him, questioning Taiha on what he should do. Both stare at each other after that unusual question. The protagonist remembers him, also wondering how he knew his location. He realizes that he must not be one of Ingyu's men. Furthermore, if the guy wanted to kill him, he would have ambushed him instead of revealing himself. The boy says he thought the man was special, noting that apparently he is part of Oseong. Huimin asks if he wants a thank you or something, claiming he should know that one cannot make a mess there. Taiha says the guy probably didn't get the full story, but assures him that he wasn't the one who made the first move. Just as the two were about to start discussing details, the madman begins to rise like a zombie behind him. This obviously leaves both of them completely speechless. Barely able to speak, Jerome admits that was quite serious. Logically, Vendetta grabs his other dagger that was lying on the ground. However, the corpse managed to dodge. The madman pulls a grenade from his pocket, throwing it and saying he'll see his friend another time. The other two are flashed by the blast. The protagonist scans the area with his eye, trying to find Jerome. He begins to walk, wanting to go after the zombie. However, Huimin stops the boy, telling him to wait a minute and stating that Taiha must maintain order. Naturally, Vendetta gets irritated by this. Moving his dagger, the protagonist claims the zombie was first in line. However, his opponent easily contains the attack. He realizes this guy predicted his movement. Huimin admits he can't see him with that ridiculous speed, but says it would be humiliating to be fooled by the same trick twice. The captain states that, by the looks of it, the boy is in no condition to fight, questioning why he doesn't try being polite for once. He admits the guy always seemed strong to him, but he is a promising talent who hasn't yet reached his full potential. In that case, Huimin must be someone capable of pushing things within the gang. Both take their distance from each other. The protagonist says he had noticed this before, but considering his skills, his opponent doesn't seem to have blood on his hands, asking if he is right to claim that Huimin has never killed up to this point. The man tries to land a blow, but Taiha disappears, leaving the guy surprised. The protagonist was already behind him, smiling as he watched him. However, surprising the boy, the captain also increases his speed while claiming he has beaten many, until they formed pools of blood. Seeing that, Vendetta is astonished by that ferocity. Even so, he dodges the blow, telling the guy to go to the third floor of the abandoned building 450 meters northwest of there, informing him it's their hideout and where the residents are. He asserts that even if Huimin is unable to kill him, he will gain something rewarding. But when he turns around, the man realizes there is no one left, standing alone in the middle of that alley, snorting with rage and stating he is fed up with that brat. The third district was in complete silence. The Oseong Gang's special force speaks over the radio, telling everyone to pay attention and ordering them to surrender. Otherwise, their squad will destroy every one of them. The announcement was repeated once more while Insik hid to avoid being hit by gunfire. He curses as he sees his dead soldiers on the stairs. The guy complains, wondering if the Oseong Gang had also planted spies in that place, just like them. Gray remained hidden in the other room, asking if the major was okay and begging him not to faint. Even with difficulty breathing, Soo-yeon tells the boy to speak lower, claiming they can't let their locations be known. It is said over the radio that they found 2 individuals in the hideout, but there were many soldiers in surrounding buildings, making the area dangerous. His subordinate asks why they don't retreat, assuring him it will be difficult with the Oseong there, but In-sik tells them to shut up. Obviously, the mercenary leader could only think about the money, stating that opportunities like this only appear once in a lifetime. The major speaks to the bald man, saying it seems he wants to go until the end. The guy claims that if they can kill Jiseob, Jerome will do the rest, but they just need to finish things there first. He continues saying he will kill the Yaburi leader with his own hands. However, a hand approached him silently, freezing him with fear. This person covers his mouth. It was Hwaryong, questioning if he had really just declared that their lives are worth 10 billion won. Turning quickly, the bald man claims the guy must be nothing more than a walking corpse at this point. However, the big man steps back, saying he will make him spit out every drop of blood, assuring him it's for everyone he killed, landing a punch in the middle of his chest. The force of the blow was so strong it made the mercenary leader vomit a large amount of blood and even threw him out of the building. The mercenaries in the building opposite are terrified, but before they can do anything, wires appear and they begin to be strangled. While jumping, Suri manages to decapitate them easily. On the other hand, In-sik had died from the fall. As she runs, the girl realizes that everything is finally over. After that, 5 minutes pass. Huimin had finally arrived at the building the protagonist sent him to. Upon entering one of the rooms, the guy asks what this is. At a makeshift table, Taiha asks the man to join them. The boy makes an observation, saying that at that table is the representative of the 3rd district, a representative of Cheongu, Ingyu, and finally, a spokesperson for the Oseong gang, declaring that apparently all the important parties are present. The protagonist announces that they will officially negotiate the district's redevelopment rights, claiming that everyone should come out happy. Still at the Yaburi base building, someone claims to their boss that they don't know how to put it, asserting they weren't deceived, informing him that they don't feel like the most appropriate person to speak there, questioning if the man could help. As someone approaches, the guy tells the old man not to grumble so much. He takes a deep breath after hanging up the phone and grabs a cigarette. At that, Taiha offers his lighter, saying it must be hard to work until such an hour. Huimin says that apparently the boy has started carrying his own cigarettes. The protagonist asks if the madman still hasn't gotten over that, questioning if he wants one in return, but he simply refuses. The captain admits he wasn't confident in his victory during the last fight, claiming that applies to many of his future combats. However, he asserts that if he has the chance to fight 3 more times, he guarantees he will beat him. The boy just watches him in silence. Irritating the guy, Vendetta says it's a shame the fact that he only has 1 life. With that, one of them finishes smoking his cigarette. As the protagonist withdraws, Huimin asks how he can be alive and well after having faced Junsu. He says he won't tell him anything there, declaring that whether the guy likes it or not, he will know everything the next time they meet. The captain smiles, saying the brat never gives direct answers, asserting that he wants to see if Taiha will act like that with the man who is about to arrive. After some time, returning to the abandoned building, Huimin returns accompanied by 2 other men, including Jae-pil. Upon entering, Hwaryong promptly bows, revering them, introducing himself as the former leader of Group B from the Incheon branch, claiming he is sorry for making the vice president go there. The old man says it's been a while since he last saw him, noting that the man has some injuries. However, the guy says that fortunately, he isn't having trouble moving. Jae-pil claims that apparently Hwaryong is the problematic one there, asking to stop with the formalities since he is no longer part of the gang, telling him not to bow to others so easily, saying he didn't let him leave so peacefully to be received that way. Even Huimin notices the strange atmosphere. The big man admits it's already surprising to see the 7th, but he never imagined seeing the 2nd in command going there. He was the one who transformed the gang into an organization incorporated into the political system. When he was appointed as vice, an uproar occurred, admitting that the guy always led them to victory, where violence is not an option, supposing that this is more problematic than Cheongu. Everyone falls silent as they hear his footsteps approaching. Jae-pil introduces himself and says that, before they begin, there are some matters he would like to address. Ingyu was still tied up while grumbling non-stop. The man asks to untie the director, asserting that he refuses to negotiate anything until then. Unlike Suri, who becomes revolted, the protagonist simply says that the man is a criminal who violated the agreement. Taiha was going to say something else, but the old man tells him to shut up. He claims the boy is an outsider who shouldn't even be there, assuring that one more word and he leaves. With that, he has to remain in silence. The man again orders that they release the director, while Huimin is happy with his superior's attitude. Since he couldn't speak, the boy just nods to the girl. She does as she was asked. Jae-pil says there is a car waiting for him outside, ordering the guy to go first. Ingyu begins to withdraw, assuring them he will pay his debt, telling everyone to wait and promising he will make their deaths as painless as possible. Suri obviously was furious with everything. The girl asks what the old man's problem is, asserting that he was being betrayed by the manager, and even so, he did that. However, Jae-pil asks how the bitch expects him to believe everything they said. This leaves her even more confused and indignant, questioning how he could know if it really was a breach of agreement or some kind of internal fight between the two. She slams the table, asserting that the director held her father hostage, the man who was almost killed by their third best subordinate. Looking at the protagonist, the guy asks if he wasn't the one who stabbed Ingyu in the hospital. This obviously leaves her without an argument, asserting that if the director really were threatening her people, there would still be no reason for war. Therefore, after they provoked and threatened that man with an outsider, his duty there is to hold both accountable for breaking the contract. After that, Jae-pil asks if they have any data strong enough to refute him. Visibly, the protagonist was dying to kill them. On the other hand, Suri says that, in that case, they no longer have any interest in negotiating with the Oseong gang. The guy says that decision is no longer in the girl's hands, since they accepted the terms of the agreement but violated them. The representative warns that in 24 hours they will send a proposal, informing them that they will have another 24 hours to respond. With that, the three leave normally. Suri kicks the table, extremely irritated. Trembling, the girl says she couldn't even say everything she wanted, declaring that Jae-pil didn't want to negotiate from the start. Taeha just agrees with her. She also supposes there is a spy among them, since the old man knew everything before even arriving there. The girl looks at the protagonist, asking if everything is at least according to the plan. He says yes, praising her work. On the other hand, the Oseong members go to the car. Surprisingly, the old man asserts that Huimin should go separately, claiming he doesn't offer a career to cowards who hide at the first sign of defeat. But, obviously, the captain doesn't like that, saying he explained exactly what was happening, declaring that he is still young and asking what he expected. However, Jae-pil didn't care and continued on his way. However, someone intercepts their car. As expected, it was the protagonist. The car came slowly toward him. Opening the window a bit, Jae-pil questions what he wants. The boy says that since both gangs are part of a larger power structure, it is important that they don't cross certain lines. Thus, if they lose the director who was just released because Cheongu recently lost its president, they will become more fragile. This would cause the agreement between them to weaken, especially if the person and the reason behind the disappearance remain a mystery. Asserting that for someone who had no need to negotiate with a stranger, he now has excellent reasons to discuss at least that. With that, Jae-pil recalls what he said at the meeting. Remembering Hwaryong, the man realizes he wasn't waiting for him, but rather awaiting the director's release. The old man admits he expected the boy to come after him, but realizing he isn't as foolish as he thought, he no longer knows what to think. The old man completely changes his way of acting, informing him that there is a spare seat and asking if the boy would like to accompany him. However, the protagonist says they are not familiar to that extent, claiming they only need to resolve things in a simple manner. Jae-pil assures him that he wouldn't set a trap this late in the game, mentioning that he simply knows of a great cigar lounge. Taeha says that only adds to the problems, as he is extremely picky about his cigars. The man says he heard Taeha had been away from Korea for a while, questioning where the protagonist had lived until then. The boy says he was in Italy. The old man says that even though he isn't very familiar with them, the place he's talking about also has cigars, trying to remember the name. Before the man could even finish his sentence, the madman gets into the car, stating that he should have mentioned something like that from the start. Jae-pil is a bit surprised by the assassin's reaction and informs him that the speed limit in Seoul is 31 miles per hour, but Taeha tells him not to worry and to just hurry. After that, they arrive at the place. A white-haired man approaches them, informing them that those are the cigars the gentleman normally smokes. Additionally, he also brought the ones he ordered. The man says he will enjoy them as always. The waiter wishes them a pleasant time. However, before he leaves, Taeha calls him back, asking if they have matches. The waiter says yes and asks if he should bring some. That was a high-end establishment with incredibly expensive drinks. The boy says that it isn't a typical cigar. It's made with a Kentucky mix and enjoyed by workers as well as other classes. It is characterized by its considerable length, which is sometimes cut in half to be shared with partners. Giving a portion to Jae-pil, he explains that this is why it was named the Cigar of Friendship. A bit surprised, the man takes it, stating that it takes half an hour to smoke a whole cigar, noting that Taiha wants a conversation of 15 minutes at most. With that, both fall silent for a moment. The old man admits that the cigar doesn't seem so bad. He also assumes he doesn't care what happens to the 3rd district, as matters like that are not something that interests him. Therefore, he tells the real reason he appeared there. First, Huimin still doesn't know how to handle situations like that. Second, he didn't understand how someone capable of facing Cheongu royalty ended up in a place like that. The protagonist says he almost died that time, assuring him he is only alive because of the people there. He requests that the man offer the citizens guaranteed housing until the redevelopment plans are completed, providing the necessary relocation support for a new apartment according to Gangnam standards, without any extra fees. Jae-pil informs him that construction alone will cost 3 trillion won. If they provide all that support, the families will gain 10 times the value of the property. Taiha asks if they aren't there to negotiate, as he had the impression the man wanted to know about his plans for the future of Cheongu. However, the gentleman denies this desire, assuring him he is there for another reason. His true interest lies in the protagonist's knowledge regarding the committee, the largest conglomerate in South Korea, controlling advanced industries and entertainment businesses across the country. The Cheongu Company, the criminal organization behind the president's assassination, with rankings based on each member's skills. Oseong, the pseudo-religious organization with the largest chamber group, composed of all post-assassination presidents. The Eternal Life Sect, the largest crime syndicate composed of military elites and media magnates rejected by Oseong. The Dobang Association, finally the organizer of the committee, the Yaon House of Changju. Since 1990, these 5 parties have overseen the country through the committee. The only thing they covet is balance, the perfect balance of power shared equally. Hearing this, Taiha remains silent, a bit pensive. The protagonist says that apparently they fear Cheong will disturb this balance. However, Jae-pil assures him that isn't it and says the boy knows the right answer, asking if Cheong was responsible for his near death. However, the protagonist seems to hesitate for a moment, recalling when he faced Junsu and the moment the old man said everything ends there. Nevertheless, the boy states it was Junsu. The man suddenly says, Cheongu obtained Junsu, claiming that was what was said the moment they recognized their strength. A man of unknown origin, age, and identity who took over as the president's bodyguard, asserting that the Cheongu presidency itself shines thanks to his light. Such a man first emerged through a coup, and although he is afraid to believe that thought, perhaps Junsu is using the organization to fuel his own ambitions. Taiha questions what the man is looking for by telling him this. Leaning back, Jae-pil assures him he has to know, declaring he is certain the boy knows what he truly wants. The protagonist supposes that maybe this man wants him to kill Cheong and Junsu. Standing up, Vendetta thanks him for the cigar, warning that he will accept it as an agreement on the district issue. The old man says that if someone outside the committee becomes aware of it, the rule states it is necessary to discard them. With that, he asks the protagonist not to try to run away, assuring him he wants to maintain the connection they have. The boy stops walking, encouraging Jae-pil to look toward the future and observe the next Cheongu board meeting. Elsewhere, a fax arrives at an office. This was the 31st floor of Cheongu Electronics. One of the employees questions who could have sent a fax there, calmly reading the message that was sent and becoming surprised to see what was written. Elsewhere, in a kind of forest near a waterfall, someone was running barefoot on the ground. That was Pyodo, a director member of the board of directors, who was trying to hide with the same message in his hands. Calling the vice president, the man informs him that Ingyu announced he will not participate in the vote. The old man who was bathing remains still, visibly irritated. The man says he sent a fax warning that a proxy will be present. The ugly man asks who that proxy would be,